I would like to say a few words about our guest speaker for the evening. I heard this gentleman for the first time on Mike Lindell's documentaries on election interference.
Yes.
He has met with secretaries of state, attorneys general, legislators, and local election officials. Since 2020, he has been working for election reform with grassroots teams in over 40 states. He explains why we have lost our recent elections and reveals why a county-level effort instead of relying on the state legislature is needed to restore our elections. If we can assemble a committed team, he will help us to achieve election integrity here in Ohio. With that being said, I am so very excited to introduce to you our guest speaker for the evening, Dr. Douglas Frank.
So good to be with you. Every time I'm in Ohio, I allow my planners to give me one meeting. And this trip home, you guys are it. And so I drove up from Morrow. I live in Morrow. So, about an hour south. Actually more east, but you know where I am. Behind Lebanon. Here. So I like it that the John Birch Society is here, and I like it that they put out these brochures for you. This was born about a year ago. I met with the vice president of John Birch Society. He was very excited about the work I was doing around the country, working with small teams. And he says, Dr. Frank, you're a Bircher and you just don't even know it. We love what you're doing. We want you to write a trifold describing your work. And that's because everything they do is on a trifold. I don't know if you've noticed that. So it was quite a challenge to reduce all of my work to a trifold. And so it's kind of in general. But it was a lot of fun to put it together, and then now they're publishing it all over the country. There are millions of these going out all over the place. I'm very excited about it, and it's basically the way to fix our elections. Now, the title that I gave it was 7 Steps to Take Back Our Elections. I like their title better. They say 7 Steps to Restore Local Elections. I'm basically saying you've got to take them back to the local level. You have to take it away from Frank LaRose. He's a snake. Okay? Okay, I met with the guy 2 years ago, and he's a snake. In fact, yes, sir. The microphone cable's too short. Yeah. All right, give me the remote one. Sure. I have a pretty big voice, though. I studied opera. So I can do that. But anyway, it's all right. I can use a mic if you want me to. So anyway, I'm delighted that this is happening because it's basically keeping me. I was pretty booked already, but now the JBS chapters all over the country are booking me. It's like constant. All right, I'll do this. All right, we're gonna hear. No big deal. Happy to do it. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. And when Jen and Mike asked me to do this, they said, can you do Montgomery County? And I said, sure. And then about a week later, they sent me a text and said, don't forget to include Miami. So I spent a little time going ahead and working up some data for those two, and I can show you. Now, I had already done an analysis, complete analysis for the whole state, and I discussed that in the Wellington rally when I spoke for President Trump. I was the keynote speaker for his first rally after being out of office in Wellington, Ohio. He asked me, he says, Dr. Frank, would you explain to the world how my election was stolen? And so I got to give that speech. It was a big deal for me. I worked really hard on that, and I focused on Ohio. We were in Ohio, and I showed a whole bunch of Ohio data. And I also used a bunch of Ohio data in the movie that Mr. Lindell made about me. He's made 2 movies. The first one's called Scientific Proof. That's an hour long, and that's just me and Mike. And he's talking about the work that I had done. He was so excited to discover me because all the mathematics I had done and all the canvassing I had done, all the statistics confirmed all the electronic evidence he had. And he kept doing this thing where he kept putting his hands together. He says, gee, Dr. Frank, that fits hand in glove with what I've found. So it was a a good meeting. That's a 1 hour long movie called Scientific Proof. And then he did another movie after that called Absolute Interference. And 30 more minutes of our interview together is in that. So it's been pretty exciting. Anyway, I'm happy to do it. I've talked a lot about Ohio. Like I mentioned, I met with Frank LaRose. He handed that interview 2 hours. They recorded it. He gave it to the Washington Times. So that should tell you whether or not he's a good guy or not. By the way, I didn't want to do that meeting because I'd already met with Secretaries of States around the country, and it was a waste of time. And I told Joe Blystone I don't want to do it, and Joe said, "You're going." And he took me by the ear and dragged me up there. We scheduled it a month in advance, and Frank LaRose still didn't show. And he sent his A-team, he calls it. And when I sat down, they said, "Dr. Frank, we're unable to reproduce the statistics you did." And so I said, "Well, show me your work." And so we spent about the first hour me teaching them how to do math. And after that meeting, after that hour, they said, "Gee, Dr. Frank, maybe we ought to be backing up our voter roll database. What do you think?" Think about it. Until I did my work, they never backed it up. Think about that. Okay. So that's the situation we're in. It's sort of not their fault and sort of is their fault. It's sort of not their fault because it's like so many things in technology. The technology has outgrown the ethics. And what's happened is our technology has basically taken over our country before we even had a chance to figure out whether we wanted it to or not. Okay? It's like my real job before I was doing this was building custom electronics and custom analytical machines for companies around the country. And I remember I was sitting one time up at Ecolab up in Minnesota, and I was sitting in a room with 20 engineers, and we were discussing a big machine. It was going to be a big project, probably $1 million project. And they said, "Well, can you make it do this? Can you make it do that?" And we were keeping a list of all those things on the board. And after a while, they said, "Okay, that's good. We got it. That's all the stuff we wanted to do now. How much is that going to cost, and how long is it going to take?" I said, "It's going to be about $2 million in 2 years." And they said, No. We have to have it in 6 months. I said, "Well, let's start taking stuff off the list then." And we started taking stuff off. And finally, we had to argue about it. And I said, there's a principle here. When you want to walk your dog, the right tool is a leash and your hands and your feet. That's the right tool. I could build you a robot to do it, but it's a lot better to do it with your hands and feet. That's the right tool for that job. And I said, that's the same way for a lot of these features I was talking about. Well, guess what? That's the right tool for our elections, too. Yeah. Electronics are the wrong tool for our elections. And there's a reason why. And it's because I'm an expert at electronics. If you come to my house down in Morrow, you'll see my lab. In fact, I spent half the morning working on a piece of equipment for somebody that needed repair. I build electronics for a living. I don't trust electronics as far as I can throw them, because I can hack into any piece of electronics you give me. Okay? I'm an expert at it, including Ohio's. And I'll just tell you a story about that in a little bit. Anyway, I'm just kind of rambling now, but it's fun to get to know you. All right, here we go. All right, so let me just kind of move ahead here. I came to Ohio in 1986. In 1986, at the request of Governor Celeste. I was a graduate student in Southern California, and he offered me my own laboratory at the University of Cincinnati and $1 million. And so I came to Ohio, and I set up a beautiful laboratory, and by 1990, I had a world-class scientific discovery. It made the cover of Science magazine, Dr. Bishop shot in multiple textbooks. I got nominated for a Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So I appreciate Governor Celeste bringing me here and setting me up at the University of Cincinnati. I don't appreciate his politics, but I sure do appreciate his appreciation of science. I left academics in 1996. I left, and I went into business for myself, and I've been doing that until 2017 when I closed my main plant down and moved out to the country and thought I was going to spend the rest of my life in my laboratory. I have a beautiful laboratory out in the country, and I've got all kinds of experiments I want to do. I'm a real physicist, okay? So I got all kinds of stuff I'm doing, but it's all of that's on hold while I'm saving the country. All right, so anyway. So I'm good to be here. I'm also a terrorist. All right. I didn't mean to be. I just woke up in the middle of this incredible war that we're in. I didn't mean to be. Some of you might have met me during the Ohio Post depressors. During the COVID epidemic in Ohio, I'm the one that got Amy fired, our health director. The way I did that is I was modeling COVID in 30 countries. It's a first-order differential equation. It's called Farr's law. And I was modeling every county in America. So people could come to my website and they could see where they were at in their epidemic. And I got all kinds of stories, but I don't want to go down there tonight. So what happened was I noticed that of all the countries, of all the counties, suddenly I couldn't predict Ohio anymore. And I was predicting everywhere else. So it's like, why can't it? And it just happens to be where I live. So why is that? You have to hear this story because it's so relevant to elections. So what happened was I went to the Ohio website, the health department website, and I went behind their reporting system because I'm a software engineer. I know how to do all that. And I looked at where they were getting all their data, where they were publishing. And I remember one day in particular, Celeste DeWine got up and said, oh yeah, today we had 72 new deaths from COVID. So I went and looked them up. 71 of them had died 4 months earlier. Oh. Only one had died 3 weeks earlier. And what they were doing is they were going into the past and reclassifying old deaths as new COVID deaths. That's what they were doing. And so I remember Jack Windsor, I started working with him, and I was feeding him this evidence, and he was asking the questions. In other words, the data that you are being told is a lie. Okay? We proved it was a lie, and it got her fired, right? But guess what? It's the same with your elections. When you go home on election night and watch the elections, if you think you're watching elections,
right.
You and me, we agree.
That's right.
Yeah, she's going, yeah, buddy, keep going. Yes. Do you think on election night when you're watching the election returns coming in, I can prove to you what you're seeing on TV is not the truth? How do I know? Because Mr. Lindell 2 years ago asked everybody to ask the county clerks for the CVRs, the cast vote records. We gathered all these cast vote records from all around the country. What it is, it's what the actual machines are actually doing over time. It tells you how it reads every ballot. So we know what the numbers were coming in. That doesn't match what you see on TV at all. They lie to you. Let me give you one example. The state of Rhode Island. If you watched it on TV, it was Bush and Biden were Trump and Biden were like even all night long, and then at the last minute, Biden pulled way ahead and won. And the story you're told on the news is, oh yeah, that's because they counted the mail-in ballots. That's wrong. If you look at the CVRs, you can see that Biden was ahead the whole night, and it was by a landslide in Rhode Island. So in other words, they were lying to you all night to keep you watching TV and watching news, waiting for the horse race, right? Last minute, and then you believe the narrative when they say, oh yeah, we counted the mail-in ballots, that was what did it. They lied to you all night. So what you see on TV isn't real, and it's not the first time. So that's been the lesson of my life, that what you are victims of propaganda. You're victims of propaganda, and you need to know what the truth is, and if you don't know what the truth is, you won't know what to do about it. So you need to know, it's like going to the doctor, you have to get a diagnosis first. So I'm going to give you a diagnosis, I'm going to tell you what's wrong with our elections, and then I'm going to tell you what to do about it. How about that? Okay. So this guy, during COVID, remember Joe Blystone? He taught me a lot. I have to admit, in 2020, I was totally naive. All those years in the ivory tower academics, I remember when they said, oh, we're going to shut the country down for 2 weeks, to flatten the curve. And everybody was like freaking out. All the libertarians especially were like, don't ever give the government power. That's a huge mistake. Don't do it. Don't do it. And I was thinking, just chill out. It's just 2 weeks. How did that work out? Okay, so that was part of my education too. And, it was so refreshing to meet true patriots in our state. He was holding these huge freedom gatherings at his farm up in near Columbus. And I was going to those with him. It was basically part of my eye-opening. And I told you already that I got to speak at the president's rally. That was a big thing. So Ohio's been important. And let's see here. Move ahead here. Okay. I rambled already too much. I'm already behind. But I'm having fun. I think it's more with my mouth flapping. Okay. So I've been in 48 states now. There's only 2 states I haven't been to. That's Mississippi and Hawaii. And I was invited to Hawaii, but it was the week of my son's wedding 2 years ago, so I didn't go. My wife would not appreciate that. So I've been in 800 counties now. All over the country, people are waking up. And I'm sorry to say, you guys are still asleep. In Ohio, you're still asleep. I hope by the time you're done tonight, you'll be awake and you'll know what you need to do. I'll explain that a little more in detail. I've noticed that I have to go town to town and do this in person. I can't do this on Zoom. And I should have learned it already because Jesus went town to town and did it in person. And it's the most successful movement in the history of the world. He didn't send emails. Jesus, and that's what I've learned. So that's what I'm doing every day. NPR noticed that. I was just on an interview today with Alaska. Was I? I was just on a radio interview today with a radio station in Alaska, because I'm going to be there. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be in Georgia, and I'm going to be there for 6 days. I'm coming home for Easter for a couple of days, and then I'm going to be in Alaska for 8 days. So they were kind of recording the interview that they're going to play while I'm there. But I've been all over the country, and they call me election denier. It's fun that NPR calls me election denier. I'm not an election denier. I want there to be elections. I believe in elections. I think they just need to be free and fair. But Ohio has some of the worst elections in the country, and you don't even know it. And I'm going to help you understand that, hopefully. But anyway, they noted that in 2022 that I had given more talks than anybody else. They talked about Mike and me and Dave Clements and Seth Ketchel. They said that I had done 150 talks at that point. I did over 300 like this in 2022. That doesn't include all the small meetings, the private meetings and whatnot. So I have been doing that all over the country. So they gave me this name. They call me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity, which I like. I think that's a great one. And Johnny Appleseed's from Ohio, right? And so I love that. I love that. And it made me look him up online because I hadn't thought about it since I was a kid. And I found this YouTube video of Johnny Appleseed singing the Johnny Appleseed song. And do you remember it? You can sing it with me if you remember. The Lord is good to me, and so I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, the sun and rain and Appleseed, yes, He's been good to me. Remember this? That's a great song. So I was watching that on YouTube, and my mouth fell open. I was shocked because it's a Disney movie. And it occurred to me, there is no way Disney would make that movie today. They would not do it, okay? That was Disney 50 years ago. That's not Disney today. And I thought, what a perfect parallel. That was our country 50 years ago. That's not our country today. Today, we don't even know the difference between an innie and an outie. Okay? We are confused. I was in Oregon. She got it. I was in Oregon giving a talk in a big high school gym, and they had a break, and I went out to the restroom, and I went in the bathroom, and I thought, oh no, I'm in the wrong bathroom, and I'm rushing out because there was a tampon machine hanging on the wall. And I looked, no, it was the men's bathroom, all right. So I went back in and did my duty and came out, and I told the people, I said, I was in the men's bathroom. I thought I was in the wrong bathroom because there was a tampon machine on the wall. And they said, yeah, the governor's ordered every male bathroom in the state to have a tampon machine, every high school. And I said, if you were in the ladies' bathroom, you would have tripped over the kitty litter box on the floor. We are confused. We are very confused. I don't need to give you more evidence than that, do I? We are not the same country today we were 50 years ago, and not in a good way. Who was on duty while this happened? We were on duty. I was on duty. I was busy in the lab, making scientific discoveries. You were busy making money and raising your kids and all that kind of thing. And guess what? We lost our country. We lost it. Make no mistake. We lost it. We have to get it back now, okay? And to get it back, we're going to have to take our elections back. Evil has won our country. We have already lost, and we're already over the hump. To get it back is going to require every one of us to step up and fight this war. Yeah. We cannot just do the easy way anymore. You have to wake up and address the problem. I was just in Lexington, Massachusetts a couple months ago, maybe 3 now. Time flies when you're on the road. And 250 people or so, and there's a bunch of Chinese people on this side, which was surprising to me. Lexington, Massachusetts. By the way, they're proud that their ministers were involved in the Revolutionary War, the Black Robe Regiment, remember? Yeah. And so their churches host me in Massachusetts. Churches don't host me in many states as I go around the country. Oh no, we have to stay out of politics. Yeah, if you go to a church like that, change churches. That's not okay. The Black Robe Regiment led our revolution. But anyway, so I was talking in this church, 250 people on this side, and these Chinese people. And I said, why are you here? And they said, we are all immigrants from China. We came through the Cultural Revolution. Everything we experienced in China, you are having happen to you right now in America. You don't know it. You're asleep. Wake up, America. And about a month later, I was in Southern California, and I had a group of Cubans say the same thing to me. We are asleep. We're the frogs in the pot. The country, we lost our country while we were asleep. We have to take it back. It's already passed. How do you know? Because they stole the election in 2020. They stole our country from us, right out from underneath us. Okay? And we were all standing there like deer in the headlights. What do we do now? I'll just, while I'm on that topic, let me just tell you one more thing. I got a slide for it later, but let me just explain something to you. Who was president in 2020 at the election? Trump. Who was in charge of the Justice Department at that time? Trump. After the election, Trump ordered a federal investigation into the election. He sent thousands of agents all over the country, and they collected massive amounts of physical and electronic evidence. We have all of that. He was sitting there in the Oval Office in December of 2020 deciding what to do. He couldn't do anything. You know why? Not one legislature would stand with him. Not one legislature would stand with him. The vice president wouldn't stand with him. The Justice Department, nobody would stand with him. So the general can't fight the war, so that's why we had to step down. We wouldn't stand with him. That's the problem. We were caught like deer in the headlights. We're the problem, and we're the solution, so we have to wake up. So anyway, that's what's going on. So anyway, they call me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity. Los Angeles Times didn't get it right. They called me the Johnny Appleseed of election fraud. But they did a whole hit piece on me. It was really excellent. I was really impressed. I think I got to the reporter a little bit. But they were, when I first started going to California, everybody was saying to me, why are you going out there? That place is communist. That place is Marxist. You're wasting your time. And except I found something when I went out there. In every town I went, there was a little group of patriots awake and alive. Why? Because their state's under communism. Their state's under Marxism, and it's like kicking their beehive. They're awake. They're more awake in California than you are here. Because they're under communist rule. And so consequently, there's like little patriot groups popping off all over the place. All I had to do is come in, show them what the problem is, show them what to do. I'm having tremendous success. So I was driving to California. I don't know if you've heard about them, but they voted to get rid of all their all their electronic machines, all their paper, and so years worth of work for that. How come no counties in Ohio have done that? Who's ahead? California's ahead. There's another county there, San Joaquin County, 400,000 voters in that county. The sheriff there already has convictions of election fraud in that county. In fact, he's leading several other sheriffs statewide to file an injunction against use of electronic systems because he's proven, the sheriff has proven that these electronic systems are being used to manipulate the elections. How come our sheriffs here aren't doing that? How come our own Secretary of State isn't doing that? You think they're on the right. You think they're your friends. They're not. They are the enemy of the people because they are stealing the elections from you. Okay? And your elections are your constitutional voice. Anyway, that's what's going on in California. We're kicking butt out there. So how did I get involved in this? So I was doing all that COVID stuff in Ohio. So I met a lot of politicians around the country because it was 2020. Everybody was campaigning, and they were saying, Dr. Frank, coach us on COVID. So I was coaching people. Well, there's this one gal in Pennsylvania, Kathy Barnett, black lady in Montgomery County. She's running for House, national. She's running for Congress. And her election didn't go the way everybody thought it should. So she called me up after the election and said, Dr. Frank, can you look at my election? It was the day after Mastriano held that big conference, a national conference in Pennsylvania. And so I said, sure, I'll look at it. So she sent me her data. I had a look at it, and I found all kinds of problems in her election. So she introduced me to two legislators, Russ Diamond, Frank Ryan and Russ Diamond. They were the legislators leading the election investigation in Pennsylvania. I showed them what I found. They invited me onto a team. This is super important, you understand. I was on a team of 6 people, given access to anything I asked for. Everything I asked for, they gave me. For example, I asked for the voter roll history for the entire, for the Montgomery County for all time. I have it since 1900. I know everybody who's ever been registered there, everybody ever voted there for since 1900. I have access to all the electronic logs for their whole state registration system. It's called the SURE system in that state. I had access to anything I wanted. I'm only going to tell you 2 quick stories. The first thing we did on our team, and I didn't lead this effort, another person did, we went county by county, and we said, how many people voted here? How many people voted here? How many people voted here? We just added up how many people voted in every county. That's one list. And then we went back and we said, how many ballots were counted here? How many ballots were counted here? We went through the whole state and counted the data. So we got a list of everybody who voted. We got a list of everybody, how many ballots we counted. Well, we counted 765,000 more ballots than people who voted. 765,000. And if you don't believe me, you can check the minutes of the House, the floor, when Secretary Bookvar brought the election to the Senate, to the legislature to certify it 3 weeks after the election. And she brought it to them, and one of the legislators raised his hand. He says, Madam Secretary, we cannot certify this election. She said, why not? And he says, because it says in state law, you shall not certify any election with more ballots than voters. And we have 765,000 more ballots than voters. And her reply to that was, oh, don't worry about it. It's just COVID. All the clerks are behind. And when the clerks all catch up on their reporting, everything will reconcile, don't worry. And so they went ahead and it certified the election illegally. And it never reconciled. I followed it for months. It never was less than about 40,000 more ballots than voters. And even then, I don't think the number was really that low. I think they were playing with it. But nevertheless, even the Secretary of State admits, it's funny because I was in Gettysburg giving a presentation, and we talked about the 765, and the next day a newspaper article, and the Secretary of State in the newspaper article said, oh no, Dr. Frank's wrong. It was never less than 40,000. It was at least 40,000 or more ballots, and they admitted it's crazy. But you get the point. So anyway, that's the first thing. The second thing is I was studying the voter rolls, and that's where I talk mostly about, because that's where you have access, and that's where I can prove a lot of stuff, because we have access to the voter rolls. In fact, in Ohio, did you know you can download your own voter rolls for your own county every day? You can look up every voter in your county. They're free online. And so that's one of the reasons why I did Ohio in the early days, because I could get the data quickly and I could study it. Anywho, so I was studying the voter rolls, and I noticed some funny things. I noticed that about 2 months before the election in 2020, in Montgomery County, which has about 500,000 people in it, their voter rolls suddenly surged by 50,000. And I wasn't too surprised by that at first, because I just figured, okay, the clerk is just, added them all at once to the state system or something like that. They all voted in the election, and that didn't surprise me too much because people who get registered at the last minute typically vote. Okay, but what surprised me is by the end of November, half of them had been removed from the rolls, and by the end of December, the second half. So let me review. 2 months before the election, 50,000 people get added to the rolls. That's 10%. They all vote, and by the end of December, they're all removed from the rolls. I didn't understand that. So I asked Secretary Bookvar, because I had subpoena authority to the legislators. Secretary Bookvar, explain to me why you're removing those voters from the rolls, people who voted. And she says, oh, they all moved away. That was surprising to me. I didn't expect that answer. So I went back, and because I know the names and addresses of every one of these people. I had all the information. I started looking them up, and she was right. Every one of them. I stopped looking them up after like 50 or 60 of them. Every one of them had moved away 10 years earlier. So understand what happened. You need to understand this. Somebody added 50,000 people to the rolls, stuffed 50,000 ballots, and then the automatic cleaning up system of the state that removes people who've moved away cleaned them up by the end of December. So then the question is who did that? Well, fortunately, I had subpoena access, so we got copies of the voter logs for the state system for months. We put a team of volunteers on it, and they started combing through that, and we discovered the day, it was a Tuesday afternoon about 1:30, when 50,000 voters were added all at one big chunk, and we know who did that. We know, because we have the login credentials of the person that did that. The problem with cybercrime is you don't know who's on the other side of the keyboard. You just know what login and username they used to get in, right? And in this case, it was the Hillary Clinton campaign. And that surprised me, because Hillary Clinton was 2016. And so I asked Russ Steinman, I said, I don't understand. What is the Hillary Clinton campaign doing in your voter rolls in 2020? And he sent me a newspaper clipping where the state of Pennsylvania had hired the Hillary Clinton campaign to write an app that made it easy to register people to vote at football games and college campuses and rock concerts on their phones. And that app, those credentials were still active. And so then we said, well, wait a minute. If she has access, who else has access? We went back through those couple of months worth of logs. We discovered 32 non-government organizations, 32 NGOs throughout the state that were stuffing ballots by adding voters to the rolls who had formerly been in the rolls but had moved away years ago or died or they weren't real voters anymore. They put them in, they stuffed ballots for them, and the state was cleaning them out automatically. So we showed all of this to the legislators. Now put yourself in my shoes. I'm still green at this point. It's December 2020. I still believe in government.
Yeah.
I'm that naive. I'm thinking if we show them this evidence, what's going to happen? They're going to say, oh no, our election's been stolen. Our election's been manipulated. That's what I was expecting to happen. That isn't what happened. What they did is they said, oh no, our voter registration system has been corrupted. That's what they said. In fact, they said, we're going to throw away our whole voter rolls and hire a firm to rebuild them because we need voter rolls for the spring election. And they paid a firm $10 million in Pennsylvania to rebuild their voter rolls in time for their spring elections. And that contract was awarded on December 20th of 2020. And 3 days later, that firm was bought by Zuckerberg. And that was my red pill moment. That's when I said, these guys are not going to fix this election. They're covering the whole thing up. And because Zuckerberg was number 2 on the list of those 32 NGOs. They were doing most manipulation in the state after the Hillary Clinton campaign. And we had the third one was Rock the Vote. I mean, we have the whole list. We know everybody was manipulating the rolls. Who's paying these NGOs to do this? Anybody know?
Soros.
Yes. CTCL, Center for Protecting Civil Life, that's Zuckerberg's group. But guess where most of the money's coming from? Your taxes. Look in your county budget and look how much money you give to your local NGOs. You'd be shocked. It's like the League of Women Voters. It's like, you look, you're going to see, you're giving huge portions of your tax dollars to your local NGOs, and they're using it to stuff ballots. And they get paid double. They get paid by the county to do the work, and they get paid bonuses by CTCL and Soros to deliver the money. If you saw the movie 2000 Mules, you're actually seeing what that's all about. Anyway, that's how I got red pill. That's what got me involved in this. I was very despondent at that point because I could tell the legislature wasn't going to fix it. So I kind of gave up on Pennsylvania for a little bit, and I went and studied Florida because I learned a whole bunch of stuff in Pennsylvania. I applied all my knowledge to Florida and found all the same shenanigans going on there. Flew down there, met with their Secretary of State, met with DeSantis. I didn't meet with DeSantis himself. I met with his election integrity team, went down to Mar-a-Lago, met with that team. They covered the whole thing up in Florida. There's almost as much fraud in Florida in the last election as there was in California. They covered it all up. I was like, wait a minute, this is Florida. This is like good land because this is like where Trump won. And, you know, and I did Ohio next because I figured, well, Trump won here by 8.5%. No, he didn't. He won by 16% here. 8% of the ballots were stuffed in this election in Ohio.
Right.
It's crazy. That's happening that's everywhere. And I did North Carolina next, and at this point I was like, by this time it was like February, and because of my involvement in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, I was in 2 of the 4 Supreme Court cases that went from Pennsylvania to the Supreme Court, and they were all rejected, remember, on standing by the end of February. And that was it for me. I said, okay, our country's gone because our courts are not going to fix it, our legislatures are not going to fix it, nobody wants to fix this. Even the good states are bad. What am I going to do? And I started praying, and if you know the story with Abraham and Sodom, I started negotiating with God. I said, okay, God, if there are at least 50 faithful people left in America, will you not destroy us? If there are at least 20 faithful people left, you're not destroying us. I'm negotiating. That's how despondent I was at that time. That was late February. And so then Kathy Barnett called me and said, I give up, Dr. Frank, they're not going to fix my election. So I'll introduce you to Mike Lindell. I met him at CPAC last week. And so I went and did a video with Mike Lindell, a documentary. He was so excited to meet me because I already mentioned, because my analysis matched his electronics. And it was the first time he'd ever heard my work. and I was teaching it to him live on camera. And if you know Mike, he's quite excitable. And so I would explain something, and he would go, oh, that means, and I'd go like on a 15-minute rant, that's fine. He would do that. Then he would calm down, and I would explain the next thing, and he would say, listen, people, do you understand what this means? And so this went on for 3.5 hours. And I was pretty exhausted after that. But I remember near the end, I was showing him a graph from Ohio, and I just was too tired of giving long explanations. So I said, look at this, that ain't natural, buddy. And I moved on to the next slide. And that's turned out to be a really good way to look at this. Because in the early days, I thought I could explain all these statistics to people and they would understand. It's much easier just to say something's wrong with that. That ain't natural. I can give you a longer explanation later. Okay. Anyway, Scientific Proof is the movie. It's 1 hour long. If you haven't seen it, it's edited down from 3.5 hours. And then Absolute Interference, there are 30 more minutes in that. And apparently that same caught on in Ohio. I like that. So I've been going around the country explaining math. And that's the way I started in 2021. I naively thought if I met with secretaries of states and hacked into their elections right in front of their faces, I've done 24 of them.
You were the guy that did that.
Yes.
Wonderful.
That was
They
me.
didn't let you in Ohio, did they?
No, they didn't.
That's exactly right, and people don't know that.
This state is in bad shape. It's one of the more corrupt states in the country. One of the worst. Kentucky's like that. They're in the same boat. The leaders here do not want to fix this election. They like having control from the top, and they're not going to give it up. But anyway, I can tell you story after story that I've sat down with secretaries of states and hacked into their elections. I can go into every single county and turn their machines on remotely. And they're like, how can you do that? Because all your machines are based upon a Dell motherboard. It doesn't matter whether you're ESNS or Dominion. I think it's ESNS here in Montgomery County, but it's Dominion in half the state. I'll show you that in a minute. They're all based on the same Dell motherboard. It's got an iDRAC 8 chip on the motherboard. It allows me to remotely control it. I can turn the computer on. You don't even know it's on because the screen doesn't come on. So you don't even know that I'm talking to your computer remotely. I've done this in state after state after state. All of 2021, I thought I could fix the country and save the country by showing secretaries of states and legislatures what was wrong with their elections. I was wrong. I was naive. I had no idea how corrupt our legislatures are. Even this legislature in Ohio. I'll show you something here in a minute. You're not going to be happy when I show you our own rating on our own house. We are not in a good place. But anyway, I'm going around the country teaching math. It's fun. This is cartoons from a hit piece in the New Yorker magazine. They did a hit piece on me. It's funny to see myself in cartoons. So anyway, after the speech, the next big thing was the Cyber Symposium. That's when Mike showed the world that he has 100 terabytes of recordings of our elections being hacked in real time. And one of the things that's very sensitive about this, and I was talking to somebody about this beforehand, the reason why he can't just give that to the public, it has to go into the Supreme Court because it contains a huge amount of national security information. You know why? All the election machines in the country are connected through a national security network. Look it up. CISA, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. In 2002, they installed sensors all around our country and created a national network to protect us from malware attacks. Okay? It's funny, I was in Langlade County, Wisconsin recently, and I gave a talk about this big of a group, and afterwards one of the guys came up and he says, hey, Dr. Frank, I'm head of the supervisors here in this county. We want to get rid of all of our election machines. And I thought, dude, I'm a good speaker, man. Only one talk, we got rid of it. And he says, you had nothing to do with it. He says, we were hacked, our county was hacked with ransomware for $70 million 2 months ago through our election equipment. That's the point. So in other words, the federal government created this national network to monitor and protect us. Yeah, it's like when the government says we're here to help, you run, right? You run. Okay, so that's the situation. Well, guess where all that election information is being transmitted, and guess who has access to that? And that's maybe how Mike got 100 terabytes of this recording. So anyway, that's important. That's what happened. including every county in Ohio, by the way. I have a little story I'm going to tell you about Lake County. I'll show you some data for this area too, but I'm giving you background so you understand what's going on. Moment of Truth was a year later, and then just this last year he did the Election and Crime Bureau. He gave his new plan of what he's trying to give tools to every citizen so that they can fight for good elections. If you haven't seen that stuff, it's on lindelltv.com, frankspeech.com. Please support him. Buy his pillows. I sleep on them every night when I'm at home. They're awesome. He's been paying for all this out of his own money. In fact, he's broke. He said at the Moment of Truth Summit, he told everybody that he'd already spent his $35 million liquid. When I first met him in March of 2021, he told me everything he does, he pays for himself. He never charges anybody anything, and that inspired me. It's why I don't do it either. Everything I do is on my own dime. I travel the country. I just ask people to pass the hat, pay for my plane tickets, things like that, and it's working pretty well. The first year I did it, I was about 6 figures in the hole, but I'm working my way out slow but steady. I'm not even yet. So please remember the envelopes. Anyway, so Mike said, I was talking to Mike the other day, and I said, Mike, I'm traveling the country. How do you want me to help you? And he says, tell everybody to go to mypillow.com and buy stuff, or go to the Lindell Offense Fund and donate. And he says, tell everybody to use the Dr. Frank promo code. And I said, Mike, I don't have a promo code. I'm not making money doing this. He says, you got one now. So he set up a promo code. So I called corporate, and I set it up so that normally I get a 25% cut of whatever you donate or whatever you buy. I set it up so that cut goes right back to the Lindell Offense Fund. So there's no, this is the best promo code because you're giving Mike some more help, right? It's not going to somebody else. So anyway, that's what that's all about. And trust me, Mike's the real deal, and this is how you know. If that didn't convince you, maybe this one. I have spent a lot of time with this guy. He's the real deal. I've slept in his house. Okay, I know this guy really well. Weeks and weeks at a time in his airplane. He's the real deal. So I encourage you to support him, right? Use the Dr. Frank promo code. It gives him more money. Okay, there's sort of a fun thing about it. Because he'll send me a text. Oh, I see you're back in Ohio. Oh, you're in Alaska, wherever I am. Because people buy stuff with the promo code, and he knows where I am. That's how he manages his business. It's pretty fun. So anyway, I'm talking about Ohio being corrupt. In a league of its own, Ohio's #1 state when it comes to public corruption. Experts say this is called this dispatch. This is them themselves admitting that we're a wreck. And if you don't believe that, in 2004 in this state, we had a mess. And in this case, guess who stole it? Was it the Democrats? No, it was the Republicans. And one of the things I was doing when I was going back through time in Ohio studying elections is I tried to get copies of the election information for every year. And there's one year where it's all been expunged from all the public records. 2004. And if you remember, this guy, Clint Curtis, testified before our legislature, and he's the one who wrote the software that stole the election in Ohio. He testified. Okay, remember that? This is real. This is not, election fraud is not new. It's been, as long as there have been elections, there's been fraud. But electronics makes it easier. So there you go. Let me tell you this story. I'm just giving you a little bit of Ohio flavor so you realize when I travel the country, I can talk in general about it, but when I make it real to you locally, it's important you understand. So this was after I was famous from the movie Scientific Proof. Somebody in Lake County called me and said, Dr. Frank, we want to get rid of our machines, but Frank LaRose won't let us. We have Dominion machines. The city council, or the county supervisors, have voted to get rid of the machines in Lake County. And we don't trust the Dominion machines. We want to get rid of them. We think they're online. And LaRose said, prove they're online, and then you can get rid of them. So they called me. And so we did something clever. During their spring election, when all the machines and systems were up, it wasn't actually me, but it's somebody that I set up, navigated into all the machines, made screenshots of every machine online during the election, and we gave it to the county officials in Lake County so that they could say, see, Our machines are totally hacked. They're totally vulnerable. We discovered a lot of things in that because we were inside the machines during the elections, too. You realize we have 6 counties around the country where we have this kind of information. With different brands, ES&S, Dominion, Hart, all those we've seen and stuff. Anyway, so what was Ohio's response? LaRose asked the FBI to get involved. And instead of going, oh dear, our elections are hacked, he got the FBI to come after us. Okay? You understand? This is not an honest politician. This is what we have. He's a snake. And, don't vote for that guy. No, he's not a good guy. All right. So anyway, it's just as much here as it is anywhere else in the country, only more so because it's in our face, we've proven it, and they're saying, jump in the lake, we're going to use them anyway. They like having control. But Dr. Frank, machines aren't connected to the internet. Did I already answer that question? Yeah. Okay, so I can go on. One of the things I've done is around the country, I've studied the different voting machines. In Ohio, we have a variety of them, and I've studied all of them, and they're all equally bad and equally accessible. It's sort of like saying which is worse, a Dell computer or an IBM computer. It doesn't matter. They're both running Microsoft Word. They're both running the same election software. It doesn't matter which system you use. They're all bad. Here in Montgomery County, you guys are using ES&S, which is the most dishonest company in the country. And I can explain why that is. Give you one. I could go for hours, so I'm just giving you one example of each of these ideas so you can see that I'm not making this up. So in 2020, it was brought to the attention of the EAC. That's the federal agency that monitors our election systems, Election Assistance Commission. It was brought to their attention that ES&S had been shipping election machines, all their new ones, to counties all around the country. 33,000 of them, 89 customers, some of them whole states, including Ohio, where they were shipped with modems in them. Even though the states said, we don't want the modems. And they were shipping them with modems anyway, because other countries use these machines, and it's cheaper for them to just ship them. And when the EAC approached them, they said, why are you doing that? And they said, well, we turned them off with passwords. Well, who has the passwords? ES&S and Frank LaRose, okay, the Secretary of State, and a few other of us, because we've hacked into the Secretary of State's computer and downloaded all the usernames and passwords. You understand? Yeah. Okay. So this is a crazy situation. When ES&S, when it came to light that they had been shipping this to everybody, the EAC told them, none of your machines can be federally certified. No elections that contain federal elections can be used on your machines. They don't meet national standards. So you know what they did? ES&S, they called all the customers and said, take the sticker off the back of the machine that says EAC certified. That's how they dealt with it.
Are you serious?
Okay? You understand what I'm saying to you? That's a dishonest company. They should have had to go back and remove the modems. There's one case I know of where they did. It's in Surrey County, North Carolina. That's where Mount Pilot is. You know? You know what I'm talking about? Okay? I love that county. When those people found out that they'd received the Zuckerbucks, they went into their county officials and demanded they be sent back, and they had to. When they found out that they had received ES&S machines with modems, they said, you have to get rid of all these machines, or ES&S has to come in here and remove all the modems. I have copies of the work orders where ES&S had to come in and remove all the modems. Do you understand? Do you have copies of the work orders in Montgomery County showing that your machines have been cleaned of the modems? No. You know how I know? Because I can still get in. You understand? And one of the things your clerk is going to tell you, I don't think your clerk is lying. I think your clerk is stupid. I'm sorry. I think your clerk is duped. Because they'll tell you, oh, the machines aren't connected to the internet. No, you don't understand. It's a cell phone modem. You call it from a cell tower. It doesn't have to be connected to the local network. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can call it from here.
Can
You don't need a network.
Can you do it tomorrow?
What's that?
Can you do it tomorrow?
Yeah.
This is what it looks like. It's a telet modem. I'm using shorthand language. Whenever I do this, I don't do it. Somebody else does it. But I arranged for that. If that makes sense. Because I don't want to go to prison.
I heard something.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do anything. That's why the FBI took my phone, though. They met me getting off an airplane.
They took my.
They took Mike Lindell's the day before, and then they took mine the next day. Yeah. Because of this activity. All right. So anyway, this is a picture of the modem that's in the motherboard. It's a tele modem. It's a 3G, 4G modem. It calls the cell tower, and it can call. You can call it, and it answers. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. And you can anyway. By the way, how do we get a picture of that? Because the same machines that you use here, and we also use in Warren County, where I'm from, were used in the Antrim, Michigan case in northern Michigan, Antrim. And the judge ordered the machines open, and there's the modems. That's right out of the lawsuit.
Dr. Frank, did they give it back, your phone?
No.
I figured.
Yeah. It's the best $1,000 I ever spent.
Yeah.
Because the next day, everybody in the country knew I was the real deal. Because they had taken my phone. They took Mike's. The reason they took Mike's, in fact, is because of me. Because I met Mike in March of 2021, and I was using connections that I had met through him to do some of these activities. And so that's why they went after his phone. And it's funny, because what gave me the idea, this is off topic, but I was flying home on Wednesday from Salt Lake, I think. And I was reading the news article that Mike Lindell's phone had been taken on Tuesday at the corner end of a Hardee's. And he mentioned in an interview that they were asking him about Doug Frank. Dr. Frank, where's Dr. Frank? And so I'm thinking, why would they like to hear? So I got out my backup drive and I backed up my phone. And then I got off the plane and there were all the agents. so that I was able, I tell you about it in the nick of time. But it was a big deal. All right, so I think I've told you enough. I don't need to convince you, I hope, that the machines are online. Let me just jump ahead, because I've already spent too much time gabbing as it is. Yeah, that's them taking my phone. So you guys are right in line. If you haven't seen this movie, it's a good one. It's only 1 hour long. It's called Selection Code. Go to selectioncode.com. It's about Tina Peters and the Mesa, Colorado case. That's my work there. We got forensic images of her machines. In this case, it's Dominion machines, and it's all explained on there, but basically we were able to get forensic images of their machines. Then the New Yorker did their hit piece, which I already told you about. I think I've done pretty good on this stuff. Let me just get ahead. Okay, so I think I'm ready for some data now. I think I've given you enough context. You know who I am, you know what I'm doing, you know what the problem is. Okay? Here's the key issue. This is the key issue we have to address. In every state in America, elections are now centrally controlled by the state. Your county election is not controlled by your county officials. Your county election is controlled by the state, and I can prove it. I can show you your own rolls. There's a really simple way you can prove it to yourself and your county clerk. You just go up to them and say, please give me a list of everybody who voted in the 2020 election. Should your clerk be able to give you a list of everybody who voted in the 2020 election?
Yeah.
They can't. And they'll tell you they can't. And you'll say, why can't you? And they'll say, well, because the database is always changing, and, the next day they've already added and removed other voters to the rolls. You're not adding and removing? No, the state is adding and removing. They're not in control of their own elections. Think about it. They can't even audit their own election because they can't even get it to reconcile. In the state of Kentucky, there's a great senator there. Her name is Senator Adrienne Southworth. She proposed a bill for the legislature of Kentucky. Very simple bill. Before the clerks can report the election results to the state, they have to internally reconcile. Make sense? How many ballots did you get? How many voters voted? It reconciles? Turn the numbers in. How simple is that, yes? The biggest opposition to that bill in the legislature was the County Clerks Association. And they said, quote, if you pass this bill, I want to get the quote right, but I'm just going to paraphrase. If you pass the bill, we'll never report because we never reconcile. We cannot reconcile. Why can't they reconcile? Yeah.
I got a question for you. If you said the state has run the election and Frank Rose is running the election, and
Yes, he is.
The election,
What's that?
the same situation that happened to Carrie Lake in Arizona.
100%.
I'm thinking that's going to happen.
100%. It's happening in every state. In fact, I've done 48 of them. And I can show you every state. I can prove to you that their elections are centrally controlled.
Wrong.
It's wrong. It needs to be controlled by you. Yes, sir.
So I know a certain person on the Central Committee that doesn't want to be, I heard that our governor and our lieutenant governor have made plans to remove that person by choosing another candidate.
Yes.
And funding them. So it seems reasonable that if this is happening, they'll probably maybe ensure that the person is gone.
They can make sure he doesn't win, if that's what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah, and they don't do it by flipping ballots. That's a mistake people make. They think that the machines are changing ballots. They're not. They're adding voters. So let me give you a simple example. Remember on election night 2020 how the election stopped? And when they turned it back on again, like in Michigan, they added 156,000 new voters and stuffed ballots for those 156,000 new voters. And 4 hours later, we have videotape of the truck backing up to the building with the shrink wrap, perfect 156,000 ballots that match. Do you understand? So they can make sure, and Stalin said it doesn't matter who votes, who casts the votes, it matters who counts the votes. I have a newer, now that we are in an electronic age, there's a better way of saying it. Whoever touches the machines last wins.
So my follow-up question is, in case this particular candidate doesn't win, is there something that maybe should be audited?
What do you think? Of course, but you'll be denied access to everything you need to audit it. Because your legislature isn't doing an investigation into it. Because your legislature, our legislature, is corrupt. And they won't. It's like the third rail of politics. It used to be Social Security, now it's elections. Nobody will touch it. So you will be denied access to everything you need to audit the election. Yes?
What's the least corrupt state?
The least corrupt? I don't know how to answer that. It's sort of like if you say, well, this state, this person has 19 tumors, and that person has 20 tumors. That person, they're all dead, right? It's like, it's hard to compare.
So it's a
I'll show you some data here, and then maybe I'll give you the best one. How about that?
It's a variety of corruption.
Oh, yeah. I was just with Patrick Byrne 2 weeks ago. In fact, he and I did a talk over near Columbus. And Patrick Byrne listed 12 different things. He says there's about a dozen different tools they have to steal the elections, and they mix and match them state to state. And I've been able to figure out about half of them just from the math. And then he brought it out and says, and Dr. Frank has reverse engineered most of them. And that's what I had basically done. That's why Mike was so excited. Anyway, let me stay on topic. We got to get to our 20-minute break and then have questions, yes? So let me show you a couple state examples before we get to our state. So I was in the state of Wisconsin. I've met with a lot of private meetings, but I only talk about the private meetings that became public. Otherwise, I don't get private meetings anymore. And so I met with Speaker Voss, Robin Voss, the Speaker of the House of Wisconsin. It was me, Sean Smith, he's a retired Air Force colonel, in charge of cybersecurity and operational testing for Space Force. And then, for Air Force. And then John Eastman, who's a constitutional attorney. He was Trump's constitutional guy. So my job was to summarize all the election fraud we found in the state already, and I was summarizing 350,000 cases. Sean's job was to show how hackable the elections were. That wasn't my job that day. And John Eastman was saying, now that you know your elections aren't secure, and you know you have all this fraud, here's what your constitutional powers are, here's what your constitutional authority is. That was the layout of the meeting. So Sean did a great job. I was about halfway through mine, and Speaker Voss interrupted me, and this is so important you learn this lesson. He said, Dr. Frank, he says, I just don't believe you have all the fraud you're talking about in our state. I said, why do you think that? He says, because we've done recounts in our 3 largest counties, and all of the recounts came out right. So I told him, sir, doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. What matters is how many bills are counterfeit. Doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. Doesn't matter how many times you count those 50,000 ballots cast in Pennsylvania.
Right.
You can count them till the cows come home.
Yes.
What matters is every ballot you're counting coming from a voter you think it's from? Is there a chain of custody on every ballot? That's what matters. All people are totally confused. They think we're going to recount and we're going to catch the machines in the action. No, you're not going to catch them that way. Because just like in the example I gave in Michigan, they added 156,000 voters who all voted between 10:56 p.m. and 11 p.m. that night, and the ballots for them showed up 4 hours later. It reconciles. You're not going to be able to defeat that. Same in Maricopa. Same problem, the 2.1 million ballots. So, anyway, do you understand recounts don't fix this problem? Okay. By the way, it was supposed to be a private meeting, but Speaker Voss stepped out of the room and 10 television cameras were waiting for him. And they pounced on him. I think somebody recognized me coming in with my bow tie. And anyway, they cornered him, and he admitted to the world that there's widespread fraud in the state of Wisconsin, more than the margins of the elections. He admitted it. And so the press said to him, well, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to address it? And he says, there's nothing we can do about it. You have to elect a new governor. He said this, and you can check me. You can go listen and prove that I'm not lying to you. Which means he wasn't paying attention in class, because we just taught him that the legislature has plenary authority over elections. It's right in the Constitution. The legislature decides. The governor has nothing to say about it. The Secretary of State has nothing to say about it. The legislature has plenary authority. It's right in the Constitution. But he just has no spine, and that's really what we're up against. They don't want to deal with it. If you didn't hear about that, if you didn't hear about the 765,000 in Pennsylvania either, you're listening to the wrong news. And everybody thinks, oh, we're listening to Fox, Dr. Frank. Yeah, you're listening to the wrong news. I've been telling everybody since July of 2021 that Fox is not your friend. And neither is Tucker. And everybody thought that he was. And I'm telling you, no, he wasn't. The 2 nights before I was supposed to give my talk at the Wellington rally, I was supposed to be on his program for 30 minutes to explain it to the world. It's like the preview before the big day. I was going to explain to the whole world how our elections are being stolen. And that was canceled. And I talked to Tucker afterwards. I said, why didn't you have me on? And he said, there's a list of 15 things they've signed a contract they're not allowed to talk about on Fox. And one of them is election integrity. Another one is Soros. Another one is vaccine risk. There's 15 lists. And I've had the same conversation with Sean Hannity, so the same thing. So anyway, I started telling people back in July of 2021, stop listening to Fox. Stop giving them your eyes. That's your capital. That's your money you're spending. You're helping to spread propaganda instead of the truth. People say, oh, we like Tucker. Well, yeah, okay, so be duped some more then, you know.
He's not with them anymore, though.
Stop listening to the real news. So on 6 o'clock Central Time, Mike Lindell has a program. He calls it the Lindell Report. That's where the real news about elections is coming out. All of the leading advocates in the country are feeding our information into this. So if there's something going on, 6 o'clock Central Time, and you don't have to listen to the whole hour. An hour of Mike Lindell is a long time. It's sort of like Rush Limbaugh, you know? Rush Limbaugh is like, you didn't have to listen to 3 hours of Rush Limbaugh. You could just catch 10 minutes now and then, and you would know what's going on. Same, listen to the first 10 minutes, and you'll know what's going on. All right, finally some data. All right. So I showed this to Robin Voss. I also testified before their legislature. Let me pause there for a second. I testified on December 8th, 2021 before their legislature. I was part of a team of 4 people. One of the 4 of us gave them the software that we downloaded from the website that was being illegally used to harvest ballots in the state of Wisconsin. Okay. Who paid for the development of that software? CTCL, Center for Tech and Civic Life. We showed all the documentation. This is not speculation. This testified before the legislator. Now, let me show you some of the data. This was my specialty. My specialty is the rolls. So I said, this is from 2009 all the way to December of 2021. And I downloaded for every single county in the state of Wisconsin how many people were in their voter rolls every month. That was a lot of work. It's 3 days of work. You got to really love this stuff. You got to be a geek to do this kind of stuff. So I was explaining to Speaker Voss, I said, notice that right before 2012, in your 3 largest counties, the voter rolls suddenly surged. And then after the election, you took them out. Does that sound familiar? Maybe like the Pennsylvania story I told you?
Yeah.
And then before the midterm in 2014, same thing, not quite so extreme. And then in 2016, your voter rolls filled right back up again. And then after the election, you removed 25% of the people from the voter rolls after the election. I said, and then they're all back again in time for the 2020 election. I said, how do you explain this, Speaker Boss? And he said, oh, Dr. Frank, those 3 counties, they have a lot of turnover. And I said, okay, well, maybe those 3 counties, but what about all of your counties? Every county in Wisconsin. And when I testified before their Senate hearing on this graph made the cover of all their newspapers over the whole state because they were being told, we can't have widespread election fraud in Wisconsin because every county runs their own election. Does that look to you like every county is running their own election? That ain't natural, buddy. That ain't natural, okay? So you get the point I'm making? Okay? Now, by the way, I've done this for Ohio, too. Same thing, but if I spend too much time on this, it's like I won't get to the other stuff I want to show you. So I'm going to jump ahead to the best state in the country. This is the best state in the country, Wyoming. They voted 3-1 for Trump. They're the most conservative. 3-1 for Trump, and 8 out of 9 people there are registered Republican. So now I'm going to show you their 3 largest counties' voter rolls since 2008. The 3 largest counties. Month by month. When I prepared this over a year ago and showed this to their clerks, I was going town to town, county to county, showing their election clerks. They didn't even know this was happening to them. And the reason they don't know is because they only look at the elections. So they're just looking, they're saying, oh yeah, it's just, they don't even notice. I just came from a small county, I got your hand, a small county in Nebraska. They have 5,000 people in their rolls, and they've had 5,000 people at every election, the last 3 or 4 elections. But I showed them that in between, 20% of their voters were being removed and replaced with new voters, and a lot of the ones they're removing are the people who voted in the election. In other words, I'm not even sure those are the real people who voted in the election. They're taking them out to cover up they churn the rolls. They're replacing them. And when I showed that to them in Nebraska, and in fact, I think I just added a new graphic. I just published this 2 days ago. I'll show you something new. Anyway, you get the point. It's every single county. What was your question?
So if I happen to start doing data snapshots of, say, a district by just going on and just, getting all the voter lists.
It's free every day in Ohio. Go online and download it.
Would I be able to, on my own, going into the next election, in fact, maybe if I just got a snapshot tonight, and then maybe kind of looked at over time to see if there's some pattern like this myself, would I see this?
Why don't you? But you notice it takes a data expert to do this. Why are you giving away your elections to data experts? In high school, you voted for the prom queen. It's simple. You know how to do it. Right now, it takes experts, and we're denied access most of the time.
I can teach them. It's pretty easy. You push a couple buttons, and boom, you got your data.
I tried for about a year to teach everybody. In fact, there's a little bit of a diversion, but it's Ohio, so Joe Blyson called me. He said, Dr. Frank, I just announced my candidacy, and the Columbus Dispatch did a hit piece on me. They said I'm not even a real voter. I'm not even a real patriot because I didn't vote in the 2020 election. He said, is that true? So I went online and downloaded the rolls, which is why I'm answering his question. Downloaded the rolls, and sure enough, the rolls showed that he didn't vote. Neither his wife nor his son. They don't. Clearly, the rolls don't reconcile, right? That's the whole point I told you earlier. So we subpoenaed a copy of the paper poll books that he had signed, and his wife had signed, and his son had signed on election day. So in other words, just because you're downloading the records, don't assume they're correct either. Because we downloaded and proved that he had voted. Okay? If you're not signing a paper poll book when you vote, you're trusting some electronic system to keep track of it. You're duped. You're gullible if you think that that's a good idea. Yeah?
Most of the time when you sign, you're signing electronically. You're signing on a pad.
Yeah, and that's such a good way to verify your signature, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Why are you voting that way? Stop it. Stop it, and I'm going to tell you how. Okay. You get the point? By the way, here's all their counties. The point is they're all the same. I'm going to move ahead. And if you think the legislature in Wyoming, which is the most conservative in the country, and they have the best Secretary of State in the country, if you think the legislature is going to fix it, check it out. This was their session last year in 2023. They had 26 Republicans in their general session, legislative session, who voted along with their most conservative Republican. 26 Republicans voted with their most conservative Republican. And they have 26 Republicans who voted along with their 6 most liberal Democrats from the 6 big cities. That's the most conservative legislature in the country. We don't have one good legislature in the country. They are all not reflecting the people in their state. You understand where I'm going with this? So if you're waiting for a legislative solution, you're going to wait for hell to freeze over. Okay? Kentucky. This is the number of 18 and older people in the state of Kentucky since 2017, and this is the number of people in their voter rolls. And you notice the voter rolls is growing faster than the population. In fact, let me zoom in on that a little bit. It's growing faster than the population, and right before the 2000 election, we got a nice election surge. They have more people in the voter rolls than they have people. You understand? And a clean voter rolls should have about 60 to 70% of the population in it. That all election experts agree. A healthy voter rolls is between 60 and 70% of the voting age people. There's some natural churn that takes place there. Anyway, so they went right past. And then we weren't the first person to notice that. Judicial Watch sued Kentucky in 2019 and said, your voter rolls are full of people who aren't supposed to be in the voter rolls. They won the lawsuit. Kentucky had to remove several 100,000 people from the rolls. Then the ACLU countersued, and they put those people right back in again. Okay? So, in other words, this is you can't trust the courts either. Right? They were illegally in the rolls. Okay? And really, it should have been twice that amount. And if people think it's just one county, it's not. 72 of the counties, all the ones in red, have more people in it than they have people. And it's over 80 now, and this is after Mike Adams, the Secretary of State there, saying that he's been cleaning the rolls. No, I've done a whole analysis of every county in Kentucky, and I can show you it's a mess. Get the point? In California and in Los Angeles, Judicial Watch sued them there, and they had to remove 1.2 million people from their voter rolls, and within 2 months, a different 1.2 million people were added back in. They keep the rolls full. If you want to know about that, watch my movie Scientific Proof. I show you the algorithm that they use to keep the voter rolls full. Okay, anyway. In Ohio, there's a group of people here that are trying to clean the voter rolls. I appreciate that sentiment. I thought that was the right thing to do at first as well. That's a waste of your time. Because you're not in control of your voter rolls. I can go in your voter rolls and make them dirty with one mouse click. So you do all this work to get them clean, and then at the last minute they can put in as many as they need to dirty up your rolls, like they did in Michigan, for example. Yes?
Yeah, but each one of those entries, I mean, it has to all be researched, right? I mean, you got to have an address, you got to have a name, you got to have... I mean, isn't that in the voter roll? It's got to have identifying information on each voter?
Yeah, but look at my Pennsylvania example. My Pennsylvania example, they took 50,000 people that formerly were in the rolls. All the information's there, just stuck them back in.
They don't, okay. They hold on to that information, they can shove it back in. Dead people that have moved away. It's like cleaning your kid's room. You spend all day cleaning your kid's room, and in 5 minutes they're back in it, right? It's a waste of time. The problem isn't that the rolls are dirty. The problem is that you're not in control of the rolls. Right. Get control of the rolls locally.
Yes.
Your clerk isn't making it go up and down. The state is making it go up and down. Your clerk is going to be policing the rolls better than some agency far away. So don't waste your time on the rolls anymore. Now, if you've done a lot of work, some of that work is still really valuable, so don't throw that away, because you're going to have a whole bunch of people that weren't supposed to be in the rolls. And guess what? They're going to vote. And that is a handy information to have after the election, because we find those people after the election to turn over the elections. I'm working right now in Shasta County on that. I see your hand up over here, my friend. What do you have?
I just am curious when you keep mentioning the agencies. I'm trying to relate that. So I was a canvasser recently, and so are you speaking?
How did you canvass? Where'd you get your list?
Ohio Democrats, and we were O'Donoghue group.
And you were knocking on doors.
Yes.
And you found a whole bunch of people that weren't there.
No, I actually talked to a lot of people. My numbers and my retention was good. But what I noticed was the group and a lot of the people that they were hiring, and then once when I was promoted and start watching the data, people weren't really working. And so it was scary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, we used to be part in the state of something called ERIC, E-R-I-C, and Frank LaRose just got rid of it last year. There used to be about 32 states that were in it, and 12 of them have now backed out of it in the last 6-8 months, something like that. And Frank LaRose said, well, it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. Well, we were paying for a service to help us clean up our voter rolls. And what it basically was is you gave an outside NGO all of your driver's license information and all of your voting history information. And that's an NGO. You can't even FOIA them. And then they were supposed to report back to the state, gee, you have a bunch of people that live here that now that used to live in Colorado. You got to take them out of the Colorado rolls. That's what ERIC was supposed to be, but it ended up being exactly the opposite. They would go into the state and they would say, there are a whole bunch of people that moved into your state that you don't have registered yet. Get them registered. And so what was happening is that's why the rolls in 8 states have more people in the voter rolls than they have people, because they've just been registering people like crazy and not cleaning up the ones that don't belong. Mm-hmm. And in Ohio, in 2020, 56% of our ballots came in by mail.
56%.
56% of our ballots came in by mail in 2020. That's enough to change, a few percentages there. 8% is what I calculate. It's funny because when I told Mike live, it was funny because when that movie Scientific Proof, Mike says, yeah, like in Ohio, Trump won by, and then he stopped and he looked over and he says, what'd you get, Dr. Frank? And I said, I think it was 16%, not 8%. He goes, that's exactly what we got. So he's like doing the whole thing. So I think about 8% of ballots were stuffed in the 2020 election in the state of Ohio, something like that. Yeah.
When I went to the polls in 2020 after 40 years of voting and handed my license, they told me I had already voted. So is that
somebody used your name and stuffed a ballot in your name?
Did they take a mail-in ballot out of my mailbox?
They don't have to do that. They can print the ballot. I have a ballot printer. I can print all the ballots in my basement. People say, well, doesn't this take a big conspiracy? I say, I could do all of Ohio myself. I just need some mules to deliver them.
The lady that pulled me aside said that it happened multiple times that day.
It happened 17,000 times in Philadelphia on Election Day in 2020. So somebody stole your vote.
Yeah, and our president of the Board of Election, he didn't want to hear it from me. And neither did our congressman. I wrote them all.
So
he didn't want to hear it.
Are you counting your votes? Somebody else is counting your votes. That's the problem. Until you count your own ballots, until you run your own election, you're never going to have a secure election again. You have to restore local control of your elections, or your constitutional voice is going to be stolen from you over and over again. I'm talking too long and I haven't even got through all the data yet. But we're sort of doing the question and answer period now, aren't we? Yeah, go ahead.
So if I compile a bunch of CSV files based on registrations, on voter history over time, would you have the ability to tell me about anomalies in it? I mean, I obviously can see the change in counts.
Yeah, I have about 2 years every week in Ohio. You could do it again. I gave up doing it because that was back in the days when I thought the evidence would win the day.
One question is there's a certain individual that is in the Board of Elections that keeps calling on me at meetings saying, do you know about any fraud? Would I be able to maybe find something, I guess, if I just did that? I guess I could, for myself.
You can do whatever you want, but you're not going to get anywhere with the evidence. You have to, I know, because I've done that.
But it's good to know it, though. That way you
Oh, yeah, you need the evidence, but you use the evidence to build a movement, and that's what this is about. Let me show you one idea. It's called voter roll churn. And what happens is, and this is what you're talking about, let's say you have 100 people, and 10 of them move away, and 10 new people move in. Well, that would be a 20% churn. 20 of the records have changed out of 100. Well, I calculated the churn for every single county in Nebraska. I just put the results up 2 days ago. Here it is. And it's almost the exact same churn in every single county and the same amount of voters that have been removed from every single county. In Nebraska. Funny story about Nebraska. I was in Nebraska talking to a sheriff, and he said, Dr. Frank, our machines are not online. I said, I know everybody says that. He
said, but in all respects, sir, your machines are online. I got recordings for every county in the country. And he says, no, our machines aren't online. I said, why are you so insistent? He says, I opened the machines myself, and I took a pair of pliers and ripped the chip off the board myself. County, maybe your machines aren't online anymore, okay? But it was after the election, right? So my recordings were before that. So that's, anyway, but I calculated the churn. I don't have to show this, but you can go onto my websites and see it. I even showed the churn by age. I can show you who they're adding and who they're removing. Everybody says, oh, we're a college town. No, you're removing people who voted, who are old, because that's where they're mostly stuffing the ballots. Anyway, I show that. That's a long discussion, but I just want you to see that's some new stuff. All right, I got to get you some data. But data, how is all this manipulation possible? Of course, it's because it's centrally controlled. It's machine stupid. But the machines aren't just that thing you're putting your ballot in. It's the registration system. It's the how do they mail ballots out? How do they receive ballots? How do they tally them? There's a whole bunch of systems, about a dozen systems that are all software integrated. The only one that is not online according to the state, which they're wrong, are the tabulators that you feed your ballot through, but they're online too. We have plenty of evidence of that. But the point I'm trying to make is this is a complicated system. It's super complicated. We just need to vote on it. All paper and no machines. I got this idea because in Ohio, 60,000 Amish people voted in the 2020 election for the first time. They all turned out on election day and voted in person on the paper. That's called voting Amish. We all need to vote Amish in person on election day on paper. And then we need to count them by hand. So like this is how they do it in all of Europe, by the way. One day of voting, they have paper poll books, paper ballots, and everything's transparent. Election experts call it the state of the art. This is my favorite way. I think this is what we should do. We call it the Cajun clothesline. We did this demonstration. We spent $47 at the hardware store. The deputy loads the ballots on. This is for a precinct of 1,000 people. 12 issues on the ballot. The citizens tally up the ballots, front and back. They run 100 at a time. We compare tally sheets. If they agree, they rubber band the tally sheets to those 100 and do the next 100. And everybody can watch this happening on their computer at home. So it doesn't fix the problem to make sure that each of these are real ballots from real voters, but it's the second half of the equation. At least it makes everybody trust the count, at least, right? And so you can see this. In fact, if you put cameras on both sides of the camera of the vote, everybody can keep their own tallies at home. And everybody would know that the counts were correct. It's a simple way to restore faith in our elections. By the way, we did this in 2.5 hours for 1,000 ballots. And so we can do it in one night. We did it for hundreds of years in one night. All of Europe does it in a single day. We can do it too. There's no reason we can't. But my favorite thing about this is that it's all online. All right. I'm supposed to give you a break. I'm trying to think when's a good point to give you a break here. Let me just see. Let me take it to let me do the strategy part. It's called the 7 steps. Basically what we're doing is we're saying that it's in that brochure. You got to form a team. You need at least 7 people on the team, and you find fraud, and then you use that fraud to find to gain control of your county legislature, your county administration. And it's a simple principle. Let me teach you the principle first, because since I'm doing this quickly, let me teach you the principle, and then we'll come back to the 7 steps. We'll come back to 7 steps after the break. You have to realize we're at war. We've lost our country. We're in a 5th generation war. Michael Flynn, I love the guy. He's written this little handbook. I was just studying it the other day. It's really excellent. We're in this is 5th generation warfare. They're taking over our country without firing a shot. And that's what we're in. And in this war, I think of each state or county or city like a game of chess. In California, the counties are like whole states, so I think of them as cities. They're city by city. But here, I think county by county is the right way to think of it. You should have strategy at the county level, I think. And you could have a legal strategy. And how are those working out for us? Any lawsuits working for you these days? No, that's a bad way to go. Or how about legislative? I already showed you there are legislative. So I'm not saying long-term legislative won't work, but in the meantime, we're losing our country every day. So it's we the people. This is the one that's working. Constitutional strategy. I want to teach you 3 quick ideas: interposition, non-compliance, and nullification. And I want to explain what those are. By the way, the biggest opposition to the work I do, the biggest opposition is the courts, the media, the local election officials, the legislatures, and the GOP. My biggest opposition is the GOP. We'd have a Supreme Court case right now, except for Ronna McDaniels, who oppose our work. So that's the biggest opposition. So I already told you, legal's not working. Every day I get a call saying, Dr. Frank, we got some new evidence, we're going to court, we're going to court. I just want to keep telling them Einstein. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. You're not going to get anything with any lawsuits. I've been in a dozen or so yet.
Then why is Trump running again?
What?
Then why is Trump running again? He knows the game. He knows what's going to end.
Yes, he does.
Then why is he... Because I've asked this of all... In my mind...
Let's save that for later.
Right.
Don't forget your question, because that's a longer discussion, and I want to get to my point. And then I promise we'll discuss it. Well, you can stay after and talk about it. All right, so legislative strategy is not going to work. By the way, here's your legislature. This is their constitutional story. This is from freedomindex.org. The John Birch Society does this for every state. And here are your legislators in Ohio. Your Republican, he only scores 58% on the constitutional scale, 62. Jim Jordan's the best at 83, but still that's not very good. Yours is Mike Turner. He's less than 50% on the constitutional scale. Okay, that's yours in your county. Okay, you're not going to get what you need with these guys, but you can't fix broken elections with broken elections. You can't elect him out because he's in and he's going to stay in. See the problem? So anyway, I already said this stuff. All right, let's talk about, yes, I can't skip this quote. The strength of the Constitution lies entirely in the determination of each citizen to defend it. Only if every single citizen feels duty-bound to do his share in this defense are the constitutional rights secure. Okay, that's Einstein said that, and you are duty-bound. America is an experiment in self-government. We're supposed to be being the government. That's the problem. We're not. For decades, we've been paying other people to be the government, paying other people to teach our children, paying other people to run our elections. It's supposed to be us, and until it is us, we're lost. We have to do it. And that's what the 7 steps do. The 7 steps take you to a point where you're in control of your own local elections again. All right, you need to start being the government. And I need you to teach you a couple of ideas. Now, what's going to save us? We're the people we're waiting for. Education is key. That's what I'm doing. But to fix is local. I don't want you to fix Ohio. I want you to fix Montgomery. Okay?
Miami.
Or Miami. Or wherever. Yes. And Plato said it best. One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is you end up being governed by your inferiors. In academics, for years, I was always told, don't get involved in politics. Physics is way easier. Because it's logical and rational, and the smart people here, those are crazy people that are involved in politics, and they are right. And I don't even know you, but I bet you're a better governor than the one we have. Okay? All right? Because they're not just inferior intellectually, they're inferior ethically, and they're inferior morally. And it's why Trump is such a threat to them, because he didn't come up through the system. He's from outside the system. He can't be bought. And he loves America, and he's fighting for America first. That's why they can't allow him to be the president. All right. I'll come back some more. I'm going to go fast here. Okay, I got to teach you a couple ideas because I want to stop in time so that they can have your break, and then we'll have questions. So, interposition. Let me tell you what interposition is. Interposition. Here's an example. Governor Grisham in New Mexico last year said, enough is enough. They had a school shooting. And she said, we're going to make a ban on open carry of our weapons. I wore my 45 here today. I just took it off because it's hot. Open carry of weapons. And so the next day, a Democrat sheriff stood up and said, we're not enforcing that in our county. Okay? A Democrat sheriff said that. And 70 other sheriffs joined him the next day in the state. That's called interposition. The sheriff is positioning himself between the tyranny of government and his citizens. That's his job. The sheriff is not a tool of the state. The sheriff is the one who is supposed to be protecting your constitutional rights. That's a super important person. Do you have a good sheriff in this county?
No.
Well, so if you don't have somebody that will interpose for you, then you don't have a good sheriff. You need to get rid of him. He's the one who's supposed to be protecting your constitutional rights. Okay. All right, non-compliance. So the next thing that happened, the sheriff said they weren't going to enforce the law. The citizens said, we're still wearing our guns. You know, we're going to wear them everywhere. And the next thing is nullification. And I just happened to be in New Mexico this day. 50 of them, 50 citizens wore their guns and went up and did a protest on the state capitol steps with their guns and said, here we are, come and take them. 50 people, right? Now, if only one of them had done it, he'd be in jail with the other J6ers. 50 of them did it. That's called nullification. We're basically saying, this law, this policy is unconstitutional, we're not complying, but we're also in your face not complying. That's called nullification. We're going to flagrantly not obey you. Are they breaking the law? No, they're following the more supreme law, the Constitution. You understand?
Yeah.
You see where I'm going to go with your elections, don't you? Because the next thing that happens when I tell you you need to run your own elections is they're going to say, oh, but the Secretary of State says we have to do it this way. Not if it's not constitutional, you don't have to do it this way. And all we have to do is your constitutional rights were stolen from you in the last election. By the way, Christiane Hall told me, don't call them constitutional rights anymore. She says, call them God-given natural rights enumerated in the Constitution. It's just a lot of words. So when I say constitutional rights, that's what I mean. Your constitutional voice was stolen from you. You have standing. You should now go to your officials and say, we cannot use these machines anymore because they're stealing my constitutional rights from me. I refuse to comply. In fact, me and these other 50 other guys are going to stand here and not comply. We're not using the systems anymore. And that's how we win all over the country. It works. You just don't comply. Okay, one more example. In a little Baptist church in New Mexico, New Hope Revival Church, something like 100 members, they, during COVID, the governor said, churches that are not essential, we're shutting them down. So the minister went to his local sheriff and he said, the very first right guaranteed in the very first amendment says freedom of religion. Are you going to defend my constitutional rights? And the sheriff said, I will go to jail before I let them shut your church down. And he stood on the steps of that church. He stood on the steps of that church week after week while the state police lined up on the other side of the road, ready to arrest the minister and the people. So he stood there interposing, literally, physically interposing between the church and the state police. And think about it, the people attended the church, so that's non-compliance. But then the nullification is my favorite part. The sheriff, he read the state law, and the state law says in a state of emergency he can deputize as many citizens as he needs. So he deputized every member of that church. That's called nullification, right? So it had interposition, non-compliance, and nullification. Are you following me? This is how you take your elections back. You refuse to comply. Why can you refuse to comply? Because your constitutional rights are being violated. You're not breaking any laws. You're holding to the higher law.
That's right. Yeah.
And Ohio is good at this, by the way. I got to tell you this. Because when Governor DeWine said you had to only have groups of 10, a group of supermoms in Ohio, they held a huge dance ball in the Capitol, and I attended with Nellie. We danced the night away, my oldest daughter Nellie, and she has Down syndrome, so everybody loves her because she's sweet and giggly and hugs everybody. Anyway, so she and I danced the night away, 600 people, we streamed it online, we invited the governor to come join us. See, we didn't just not comply, we nullified. You see the difference? We nullified it because they're in your face. We're not going to go pound sand. The other thing is, he said you had to wear masks in public places. So the same group of supermoms organized shopping days all around the state. They would show up at Kmart. They would go in, 30 of them, take their masks off, and go window shopping for 3 hours. Next day they'd go to Walmart. Next day they'd go to Lowe's. And what are they doing? They're nullifying an unconstitutional order. Do you understand?
Yes.
Nullify these elections. You do not have to use any system which disenfranchises you from your constitutional rights. Your God-given natural rights enumerated in the Constitution. Yes.
I just have to let you guys know. Materials
That's Truella's book.
tonight are on nullification and interposition, and
we've got little cards
Yes.
that tell you how to do it. So please come to the table.
We either use our rights or we lose our rights. I'm almost at the break point here. And I haven't even shown you your own data for your own county. I wear my gun to, this isn't me, but I wear my own gun to the shopping every day. My big 45. I wear it whenever I'm at Kroger. Big and obvious. Like a cowboy. Because I want it to be normal. You know, we have open carry here. We have constitutional carry here, okay? If you don't use your rights, you lose your rights.
That's right.
Use them. You have a constitutional obligation to be armed and proficient. It is your duty to defend yourself, not the sheriff, not your neighbor. You're supposed to be proficient in defending yourself. Anyway, my favorite thing, one day, this is my dream, one day a little boy will look at me in the grocery store and say, Mommy, he has a gun. And she'll say, yeah, don't you feel safe? That'll be my dream. And she says, and by the way, Mommy carries 2. That is my dream. It has to be normal. It's right in the Constitution. So this is a great stopping place for a break. And I've got more. I need to show you your own data from your own county, so that'll bring you back after the break. This is war between good and evil. The Constitution is our best weapon. We need to fight the First Amendment war so it doesn't become a Second Amendment war. Okay? And we need our First Amendment rights like weapons. Let me give you one example of that, and then we'll have our break. In Shasta County, we have one commissioner. We have 5 commissioners that wouldn't go along with the vote, and so we were just missing. So we began picketing her at her house. We began picketing her when she went to the grocery store. We picketed her when she dropped off her grandchildren at the elementary school, which was beautiful. Because when we picketed them there, then she had to explain to her grandchildren why she wasn't defending their constitutional rights. Because all the signs said, Miss Jones isn't defending her constitutional rights. And then the students, those grandchildren, had to explain to their fellow students why their grandma wasn't defending her constitutional rights. And the teachers had to deal with it. It was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful moment. And the next day, she quit. And one other commissioner quit as well. And that freed up 2, and we were able to have an election. And Kevin Cry was in there. And if you watch right now, the news is going to be full in Shasta County right now because Kevin Cry, they're trying to recall him today. The margin is 47 votes, and they're doing a recount right now. It's a big deal because they're trying to get back to all machines and everything in Shasta County. But anyway, when she quit, we celebrated. And she went out on medical leave for depression and anxiety. Yeah, because we were picketing and we wrote songs about it. We were singing them on the radio and singing them on the street. We were fighting the First Amendment war. And this is First Amendment blood, okay? In a war, there are casualties. And you want more casualties in your enemies than in you. In a war, there's real physical blood. But in this First Amendment war, we need to have First Amendment blood too. It's a war. We need to start acting like it. So anyway, that's just one example of weapons. I've read this book, The Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky. There are amazing ideas in there. And I have another book called Beautiful Trouble. It's just like what everything that the left has done to us for like 40 years, all these great ideas that are First Amendment ideas, we've been deploying them like weapons everywhere. And this is how we're winning. But anyway, it's all about nullification. All right, that's a great place for my break. Yes? Yes. And save some time for questions. Maybe 10 minutes. So this is Ohio. This is since 1940. How many people are voting age in Ohio? And you'll notice there was like a surge in the mid-1900s, and then it's kind of gradually increasing ever since. Kind of leveled off. So this is our population in Ohio. Thank you. That's voting age population all the way up to 2023. All right, now here's the number of people in the voter rolls every year. And I want you to notice that in this period of time, the rolls kind of paralleled, and they were at about 60 to 70%. And that's a healthy voter roll, like I said before. But then something happened. You see here, right? After 1992, the voter rolls surged. You see that? They were growing faster than the population. Anybody know what happened in 1993? NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, is when the federal government started paying states extra money to start putting people in the voter rolls. And so states started inflating their voter rolls. Anyway, so you can see that. And this is the number of people who voted in every one of our Ohio elections since 1940. And you'll notice that there's a natural little oscillation because there's a presidential midterm, presidential midterm, presidential midterm. More people turn out for the presidential election than the midterm. That's a natural thing. Now what I did is, I only had it every 2 years back here, but starting in 1980, I know it for every year. So that's why it looks suddenly noisier here, except that it looks noisier in another way too. You'll notice that it was following kind of a nice trend, and then suddenly there are much bigger peaks. And when did that happen? Oh gee, that happened with the rolls, especially since the rolls shot up. Look how suddenly the amount of voting has jumped up dramatically after they filled the rolls. Anyway, so that you can just see that. The registration is faster than the population trend. That's in every state in America, so Ohio has that same problem. And if we can calculate how much that is, it's about 1.8 million too many out of our 8 million, so it's about 22% too many people in the voter rolls. So that would mean if you took a copy of the voter rolls and you started knocking on doors, about 1 in 5 of the people aren't going to be real. They're not going to be there. It's not, and that's a conservative estimate. I usually find that it's about 50% higher, so I bet you it's closer to 30%. All right? That's one thing to show you. And notice there was a sudden jump in voting in our state after they threw the voter rolls. So after they pumped the voter rolls, and what happened in 2002, by the way, is when they added the electronic machines. So as soon as they added the electronic machines, suddenly we have more voting. Now wait a minute. Machines shouldn't change the amount of voting. Machines should just make it count easier. Okay, but you see, you can actually see the effect of the machines in our elections with your own eyes. All right. Now what I did is I went for every single county in Ohio, and I showed you how many ballots were cast in every election. And there are a lot of counties. But it's hard to look at it this way, isn't it? But if I put them all on the same scale, this is an absolute scale, if I put them on a percent scale, you can see this. And what you'll notice is that our elections used to be random in all the counties, but suddenly they're all in sync. Why are they all in sync? Because now they're all centrally controlled. They didn't used to be centrally controlled, now they are. Okay? You see it with your own eyes. Here's the number of registered voters in every county. And you'll notice that they all essentially are climbing to a new maximum. Your populations aren't growing like that, but the rolls are. Now, here's Montgomery County. So notice that you have look at the sudden jump in your voting after they added the electronic machines. See? The voting was peaked here, now it's peaked here. Your population is actually declining in Montgomery County, but your voting is going up. You suddenly became more patriotic. Right? It's pretty. I mean, that's a pretty big surge. Something from 250 to almost 300. It's about 1/6. Gee, that's about 16%. How many people too many in your voter rolls? About 20%. So you add all those extra voters who aren't real voters, and suddenly they're all voting too. Okay, we can compare the trend. Yes, you got about 13% too many people in your voter rolls. Okay, here's Montgomery County. What? I just showed you this. Must have clicked the wrong button. Here's Warren County. Population is growing there. That's where I'm from. Voter rolls growing, but look at the voting. See the same big jump? See the same big jump in voting there? Okay, and we can show you that the voter rolls are growing faster than the population. You have about 31,000 more people. That's about 18% high. How about Greene County? Oh, by the way, notice again, same jump. Wait a minute. Every single county in the state suddenly started voting more. All at once. When did that happen? After 2002, after hanging chads, and the federal government did what they called HAVA, Help America Vote Act. The federal government started giving states money if they would use electronic machines and giving them the grants to pay for the electronic machines. That's when we added them. So we added machines and we went from this to this. Why would machines increase the turnout of voting? Here's Greene County. You have 13% too many people in your voter rolls, at least. Here's Clark County. Clark County's got at least 12% too many people in their voter rolls. In other words, it's every county. Why are we not surprised? Because it's centrally controlled. It's not controlled by the county. Yeah.
And I'm guessing something that voted keeps going down in 2016, though, on all these. The number just drops dramatically.
Right here?
2016.
Yeah, it was a low turnout year for some reason.
But that was an election. That was a
low turnout. But wait a minute, she's saying, that doesn't make sense. That was like the Trump-Hillary thing. We should have a huge turnout. Huh, interesting. Trump won that year, huh?
Yeah. White House.
Don't forget. Yes, White House. Don't forget. Hillary complained for years after 2016 that the Russians hacked our election. She's not wrong. The election was hacked, but it wasn't the Russians. And that's an interesting story I can probably do here. All right. So here's Miami County. I did all this read this morning. So even though it's old date. 15% too high. In other words, they're all the same amount, about the same amount too high, aren't they? Problem? Okay. 15% too many people in their voter rolls versus the trend. Now here's another way to look at the data. This is what I showed at the president's speech. This was the first big breakthrough. This is by age in Montgomery County for the 2020 election. What it is this is how many people there are of every age in Montgomery County by age. So, from 18 up to 110 years old, looks like the most popular age in your county is about 28 years old, something like that. The black curve is how many people are registered to vote in your county. And the red curve is how many people by age voted in Montgomery County. The red curve. By age, how many people voted. Just look at the red curve and the black curve for a minute. You notice anything interesting about the features in those curves?
They're the same.
It's like they're very similar features, aren't they? If I make an assumption, if I assume that every other county in Ohio votes exactly the same as Montgomery, if I assume that, then I predict this light blue line right here. You see it underneath the red curve? That's me assuming that every single county in Ohio votes exactly in the same proportion as every other county in Ohio. And when I showed this to LaRosa's team, they said, we can't reproduce this, Dr. Frank, so I helped them reproduce it. They were able to reproduce it after they knew how to do it. Okay? But it's not just, and by the way, how good of a fit is that? It's 0.999 correlation coefficient. If it's a 1, it's perfect. Okay, so it's part per million accuracy. Why even hold an election? I can tell you how many people are going to vote. Yeah. Here's Miami. Miami County. Notice they have, some ages you've got like everybody voting. Think about it. What did I say? The black curve should be lower. There shouldn't be everybody registered. You should have lower. But if you don't have everybody registered, you can't stuff all those ballots. You need to inflate the number of people in the rolls so that you can put in all those ballots. That's Miami. Here's the problem. 0.998. Even a small county. In other words, it doesn't matter whether it's big, small, urban, rural, black, green, Chinese, Mexican, doesn't matter. Every county votes exactly the same. Here's Clark County, 0.9. It doesn't match as well for some reason. It's still a really good match. You can just still see that this is going on. And I think the reason probably it doesn't match perfectly is because the election's cleaned up afterwards. I'd have to go look and see. But anyway, here's Greene County, 0.999. How come I can predict every county? Because they're all exactly the same. That's why. It has nothing to do with me being smart. It has to do with the fact they're all the same. Here's Butler, 999, and Warren. And I think the way to explain this to you, I'm not going to do that, so let's set aside because we don't have time. I'm going to show you, explain to you so you can understand. I had a Supreme Court case. This is one Ron McCain stopped. And I used Missoula, Montana data. I used the whole state of Montana. The reason I use Montana is because every single county, every single ballot, I know when it was cast. Whether it was cast in person, cast in the polls. I have tons of data. So I used it for my Supreme Court case, the state of Montana. And Missoula, here's an example from my Supreme Court case. The blue curve is their population. And notice they have a lot of young people. They have a big college there, right? Big university in Missoula. Here's the number of people in the voter rolls. By the way, do you see these two peaks on the side? Yeah. Mike noticed those too. They're in every graph in every one of my Ohio counties. Did you notice that? How come you have the exact same proportions, the same shapes in your counties as they do in Montana? Are we the same as Montana? How come they're the same? That's one of the algorithms which I talk about in scientific proof. I can use the 2010 census and predict exactly the distribution of your registered voters in the state of Ohio because they're filling it up to that exact same amount every time. But anyway, Here's the number of people who are active voters in Missoula. And here's the people who actually voted. Now, just look at that for a minute. That's like everybody above 40 years old is like 95+% voted. Like everybody voted.
Yeah. Hear what you're saying about all the counties and all the states look the same. Doesn't that tell you that maybe it's the feds that are doing
Well,
this?
maybe you misheard me, or maybe I've been going so fast, I went fast. I have a longer presentation of this. You can watch it on Scientific Proof. But what it is the way I'm able to predict every county in Ohio, the math I use for that only works in Ohio. And I go to another state and I have to use a different set of parameters. Every state has its own set of parameters. That's how I originally concluded that it was controlled state by state, even before I knew I had the evidence. Now I had the evidence. So what I was just noticing is that these peaks are not the overall shape. It's just an artifact of the algorithm that they use to stop the roll. But anyway, do you notice that this is like ridiculous turnout, this red curve? Okay, it's not very believable. Here's who voted by mail. And here's who voted in person. And I want you to notice that it's a different shape. And when I did these data, I started looking at all the other counties in Montana, and I noticed that every one of these shapes of who voted in person was different.
From each other?
I couldn't predict who voted in person in Montana, but I could predict who voted by mail. In other words, we need to vote in person. That's a real election. Let me illustrate that in another way. Here, this is my Supreme Court case. That's why they're all nice slides and everything. Here's the number of active registrants who are in Missoula, same curve as before. Here's who voted in person. And then what they're doing is they're filling in to the same shape in every county. So it's the same. Now we've gone out and done canvassing, and we know that some of these ballots that come in by mail are real. About 60% of the ballots are real. They're the people who vote in person, and they're filling in with absentee ballots, the stuffing the ballots, all those other names. All right, so you see how that's working. That's why I'm able to predict it, because it fills it into the same shape every time. All right, I think I've kind of explained a lot. Let me quickly summarize, because you're going to talk to your friends tomorrow. The voter rolls in Ohio are growing faster than the population. Got it? Easy one to remember. We're on average around 20% too many people in our voter rolls. That means if you look at your voter rolls, about 1 in 5 people don't belong there. So, voter rolls growing faster than the population, about 1 in 5 don't belong there. If 60% of our ballots are coming in by mail, all those people that are not real voters can be submitting ballots. And that corrupts your election. That's the core way that our elections are being manipulated and hacked. And I can just print the ballot and turn it in, drop it in a drop box. You know that our county's got the Zuckerbucks, right, in Ohio? The Zuckerman gave grants to the counties to help them with their elections. If you read the contract, it says that in exchange for the money, they have to agree to put out unsupervised drop boxes. It says right in the contract. Unsupervised drop boxes.
Right.
Right in the contract. If you took the Zuckerbucks, you couldn't put out a supervised drop box. You had to put out unsupervised drop boxes. What did we basically do? We sold our elections. We gave away our elections for money. It's like Winston Churchill said, we know what you are, we're just haggling over price. We sold it. We sold ourselves. Right? That's what we did. All right. So, in summary, because I'm trying to be really quick, leave some time for questions. Voter rolls growing too fast. 20% of people in your rolls don't belong there. States totally centrally controlled our elections. Your local clerk doesn't even know what's happening to them. That's not the problem. The problem is that we are relying on somebody else to run our elections instead of us. So what the 7 steps do, in the 7 steps, is I help you with the voter rolls, you form a team, we find actual real fraud, like this gentleman here just described his case. Let's say we find 100 cases like that. In the past, what would you do? You'd run to the Secretary of State. Look at all the fraud in our election. Nothing happens if you do that. You run to your DA, nothing happens if you do that. You run to your county commissioners, nothing happens. You go to your sheriff, nothing happens. The only thing that happens is when you build a movement around that fraud. What you're going to do is you're going to find these 100 cases, you're going to document them perfectly. This is a dead person, here's their death certificate, it's way in advance of the election, yet we counted a vote from him. That's fraud. Here's a person who lives in Colorado now. They've lived there 5 years. They're voting in Colorado. Here's their voter record. I can help you get those. Yet they're voting still in Ohio. That's fraud. Every one of those fraudulent ballots, even though he didn't get to vote, what if he did get to vote? A fraudulent ballot would have nullified his real ballot. When you have 100 cases of fraudulent ballots, and this is what we did, we arrange a day. 50 of you show up at the county commissioner's office, or the county commissioner's meeting. Do you have supervisors or commissioners in Ohio? I don't remember. No, not board of elections. Your county commissioners. County commissioner meeting. You each get 3 minutes to talk. You read those cases into the formal record. And then you take out a newspaper article and you publish them all. This person's dead, but they voted. This person lives in Colorado, but they voted. You list them. Illegal and fraudulent voting. All fully documented cases. Okay? Now, they're on notice. And you tell them, it's a felony to disenfranchise a person from their constitutional rights. If you keep using these systems, you're disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights. What I've learned is at that point, when you get to that point, they begin caving like crazy. And if they won't, then you do like we did in Shasta County. You start picking them at their houses. They cave then usually because they want to be liked. They don't like not being liked. And you just make sure that nobody likes them. And you take out billboards. And you do all kinds of things, and they quit. And we got 2/3 of the clerks in Pennsylvania to quit, for example. You can really make this happen. Now, you notice you're not giving up this job to somebody else. This is you being the government. And you're not going to them and saying, pretty please, we get rid of these machines. You're going to them and saying, we're not using these anymore. We're not asking permission. You work for us. We are telling you, you may no longer use them because you're disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights. We're nullifying the use of these machines. Oh, what about the Secretary of State? Well, that's where I hope your sheriff steps in. If he doesn't, then the people will have to step in like they do in Alaska where they don't have sheriffs. And the whole Matsu Valley, I'm going to be up there in 2 weeks, whole Matsu Valley, they're running their own elections. They're not letting the state run their elections. It's beautiful. They're really conservative. They're just saying, pound sand, state. We're not going to do what you say. Because if we use your system, it disenfranchises us. We're not going to allow that. So you have to do this. And Shasta County is only 75,000 people, and they did it. Montgomery is what? I just had you up there. I remember. Several 100,000, I think. You're going to have to do it too. You have to step up, and otherwise you're just going to give it to them. So if you don't think of this as a war, you're not going to do the right stuff. You know, I'll finish with this.
Are you saying Alaska created a parallel voting system?
Yeah. Yep. When they did ranked choice voting, Matsu Valley said, no, we're not.
Well, rather than reforming the existing corrupt system, they just declared independence and went over here and created a parallel.
They run their own elections. Locally.
Isn't that the...
That's it.
Isn't that what we have to do? I mean,
yes! That's what we have to do.
We can't...
He gets it.
You can't reform this corrupt system.
No. Not as long as you're allowing somebody else to run your election.
So how do you
You're
get
done.
everyone to go to the one?
You have to run your own election. I'm sorry.
Yeah, independence.
Does it make sense?
Independence.
And if it's just you standing on the steps, nothing's going to happen. But if all 100 of you pack the commissioner room, and by the way, the day that you read those into the record, you make sure there are 50 guys on the street with open carry, and 50 ladies with their signs, talking about how your constitutional rights, and create a media event, and buy billboards, and take out newspaper ads, and show the evidence you found. And when they say, oh, it's only 100 votes, that's not enough to change the elections, then you can just say, oh, yeah, it was just one murder. That's not enough to change the population. Okay? No, every one of those is a constitutional voice that's being stolen. It's a constitutional right that's being violated. And furthermore, you say to that commissioner when they say that, because they always do. I've been done doing this so many times, I've heard all the answers. You just say to them, okay, well, if 100 votes don't matter to you, then you and 99 other county officials have to give up your ballots in the next election, because that's what you're asking us to do. You see, this is no more Mr. Nice Guy. This is real. This is your constitutional voice being stolen from you. You can't tolerate it anymore. If you do, then, power to you. Go live somewhere else. But America is a country that covenanted with God at the very beginning. We need to restore that covenant. We need to turn our eyes toward heaven. We need to repent. And across the country, as I go across the country, I see it not just a political revival. I see a spiritual revival too. I see this happening, and you need to be part of that. And if you're not part of it, well then, you're going to have to explain to your grandchildren someday why they don't have a country. Why you didn't get involved when it mattered most. So, anyway, how about that? Finish, and I don't know if we have time. I talked a lot. 10 minutes for questions. Yes, sir.
Who is your canvassing company that you made mention of, and do you canvass in Ohio?
I did not canvass in Ohio.
But I was asking, do you have a canvassing company?
Canvass.
That canvass and go.
There are a lot of teams doing canvassing here, yeah.
Okay, well, who do I?
They're mostly trying to clean the voter rolls, though.
Say that again?
They're mostly trying to clean the voter rolls. This guy's trying to clean voter rolls. There's a gal named Eileen Watts. She's kind of heading the state up on this. And if you sign up on causeofamerica.org, causeofamerica.org, you can sign up. If you sign up there, we'll connect you to the person in your state. Causeofamerica.org. That's Mike Lindell's support infrastructure. If you sign up, we'll tell you who's already doing it here, and you can join.
And I'm saying that because canvassing as a canvasser in Ohio, because I did do Dayton and I did Columbus, Ohio, as well, Franklin County, Montgomery. As a canvasser, it was the best way to reach the people because I had a picture and a shirt, and it attracted not only just the people that I had on my list to contact, but it attracted people that wanted to know what was going on, and that was complete.
Let me show you something that will happen. You'll go up to a door, because I'll help you do this, and you'll say, there are 4 people registered to vote at this house, and all 4 of them voted. And 2 of them are Smiths, and 2 of them are Jones. And you'll say, hi, yes, I'm Doug Frank, I'm with the Election Integrity Group of Montgomery County. It says here in the voter rolls that there are 4 people registered to vote here, and all 4 of them voted. Can you verify that? And the people that there, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, will say, well, we bought the house from the Jones 3 years ago. How come they're still voting here? And when you do that, you just made a convert. They believe in election fraud right at that moment because they were looking at it with their own eyes. And you believe in election fraud. So the canvassing step is really important because you're not merely gathering evidence, because that's how you gather evidence, but you're also convincing. And by the way, Mr. and Mrs. Smith will tell everybody in their neighborhood. It's kind of like the woman at the well went back and told everybody in her village, right? They will tell everybody, gee, there's fraud in our own neighborhood. Gee, I thought it was just in Georgia. Gee, I thought it was just, in Wisconsin. No, it's here in Ohio, too. How'd I do, boss?
Wonderful.
Okay, good. Another hand. Mr. Birch.
You mentioned that Lake County voted to get rid of the machines.
Yes, they did.
Frank LaRose told them they couldn't. How is that standing currently?
I don't know. I don't know how that's standing. I'm sorry. I didn't follow it. I've just been busy all over the country.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know how that's standing. But I do know that they ended up keeping some machines or the other. They might have switched. But I tell that story not because... I tell it because it shows their true colors. I spent more time at the beginning of this talk talking about stories, but I was connecting it to Ohio. Maybe a little too much because I'm here.
But the reason I was asking that was...
Yes,
if any of us counties here in Ohio vote to get rid of the machines and Frank LaRose can overstep his rights and stuff it down their throats so that they have to use
How can he do that? It's unconstitutional.
I don't know.
See why nullification matters? If it's just Mr. Birch saying, I'm not going to vote that way, nothing happens. But if everybody in this room says, we're not going to do that anymore, we're not going to vote that way anymore, we're going to vote on paper and we're going to tally our own ballots. You know how they're doing it in this Clark County? It's a different Clark County. Clark County, Washington, southernmost county. They're right next to Portland. The churches have organized, and it's a little different there because they mail ballots to everybody. In Washington, it's all mail. People are bringing their ballots to the churches, and they're counting the ballots first. And then they turn them all in together. You understand how that works? Why couldn't you do that? You're nullifying their system. And you're not asking them for permission. You're being the government. You have to start thinking that way. You're upside down. One of my favorite examples in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, when Antifa showed up in town, the citizens lined the streets with their guns. And Antifa, got out of the van, and the leader of the group came up to him and said, we believe in the First Amendment. You guys can have your demonstration, and first window that breaks, we open fire. And all the guys got back in the van and drove off to the next town where they didn't meet a bunch of citizens. And that town is where Antifa held all the riots and the looting and pillaging and all that. Why? The people were the government. The Second Amendment says you're supposed to have a militia that's a well-regulated militia. The Second Amendment isn't that you have a right to bear arms. You do. But the reason you have a right to bear is because you're supposed to be armed and proficient and part of a militia that defends your community. I felt guilty when I understood that a couple years ago, so I bought my AR. I practice every time I come home, man. I'm out in the country, man. I got that tree is full of bullets. I'm pretty good at it. Okay, this lady over had her hand up. Yes.
So we're at war. Who is our enemy? Is it China or is it the global state?
So if you go read the John Birch stuff, they've got a whole bunch of stuff about the World Economic Forum and the Soros and all that stuff. They got tons of stuff. I think all of that is correct, but it's not really your concern locally. Locally, your job is to take over your elections and run your own elections. I don't disagree with that. It's correct. In fact, remember when I did the 32 NGOs in Pennsylvania that we found? A lot of those are all, when you look into them, they're all supported by Soros money and World Economic money. They're just pouring into those. So they're our true enemy. And it's like they have an infinite reservoir of money. So you're not going to win with money because they're going to outspend you. You have to win with the people. You have to educate the people, and then you have to get together and say, we're not going to vote this way anymore. Like, you have to have a movement. You win with a movement. Yes, sir. Back.
So to vote to get rid of machines.
To vote to get rid of machines, did you say?
Yeah.
You're not going to vote to get rid of machines. You're going to require your commissioners to tell your county clerk no longer they can use the machines.
100 people out of the whole county for whatever we.
Yeah, because it's just 100 that first month, and then it'll be 200 the next month, and it'll be on the radio, and you're going to be telling everybody and buying billboards that your elections are fraudulent and actually showing the evidence. They cave. The problem with you is the same problem with me. Is we think they're like us. They're limp noodles. Alright? They cave everywhere. It almost never gets to this point. As soon as we start chewing the fraud, they cave. It's amazing how fast that happens. But the problem is they need to. So you have to present yourself. That's why I said when you read the cases into the formal record, you have 50 people on the street carrying weapons and 50 ladies with their signs saying you're disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights, and that's just the start. And you tell them, if you think this 100 isn't enough, you ought to see the 500 more we have in process that we're researching right now. You're not asking the sheriff to research it. You're not asking the DA to research it. You're researching it because you're being the government. Yes, follow up.
So you said the state runs the elections.
Yes, I just showed you that.
How is the county going to tell the state we're not going to do what you tell them?
How is the county going to do that?
Yeah.
You're telling them we're not going to use it anymore, just like they did in Shasta. The Shasta County Commissioner said we're not doing this anymore. Now, if the commissioners don't do that, then that's when we launch our First Amendment war against our commissioners. And that's fast. They're limp noodles. They go fast. They go fast. Yes? You good? I'm telling you, this works. Yeah.
So the elephant in the room is, what about the 18 million illegals? Is it all for the vote, or is it for invasion?
I know there's a big illegal population here in Montgomery County, in Dayton, right? There's a big. So what you need to do is you get a copy of the rolls, and you'll know what neighborhoods they live in. You don't try to work with the name, you work by the neighborhood. And you're going to find that a whole bunch of them voted. So what you do is you go to their neighborhood, not you because you're a gringo. You need to get somebody who hablas español, looks like them. And they go and they knock on the door and say, "Hey, Jose, it says here in the voter rolls that you voted in 2020, man. Is that true?" And Jose says, "No, man, that's illegal. That's a felony. If I voted in the election, then I would go to prison, right? I couldn't be a citizen." "That's right, Jose. So you didn't vote. Well, what? It says that you voted. Somebody got you. Oh, yeah, this guy came through the neighborhood, and he was buying all the ballots, and somebody ordered absentee ballots for us all." And they can't throw anything, got money for their ballots, okay? So now the thing about it is, if Jose now knows that his ballot was used in a felony, he can never be a citizen, ever. Because of that, you can get him to sign an affidavit swearing he didn't vote that ballot. And you collect enough of those, and now that can be part of your hunting. Get 20 or 30 of those, 20 or 30 dead people, 20 or 30 people who live in another state. The whole point is, it's happening in multiple ways, and the problem is because you're not in local control. By the way, it's not illegal in some states for illegals to vote. In fact, in California, they're encouraged to vote. In fact, in California, every illegal alien who gets a driver's license is automatically put into the rolls. Okay, which is why they have so many that are not eligible. But they're not supposed to vote in federal elections. They're supposed to only vote in the local elections. But there isn't a separate ballot. So how do you know, right? Anyway, yes, sir. Sorry, you next. You let this guy go. Get a blue shirt. Close.
So you had a slide of Wyoming, and how Republican, conservative it was, right?
Say again. I'm sorry.
Since Wyoming is so conservative,
right? It's the most conservative in the country.
Why would they go through the time and effort to purge and then put people back on the voter roll?
Who's doing that?
Somebody at the state level.
A program is doing that. An algorithm is doing that.
Okay.
It's not a person doing that.
So the state's not even in control at that point.
Well, somebody at the state level is giving access to that.
Okay.
And so in every state, but for
all
example,
that done by? I mean, how did all the other people know who's on the voter rolls and names? Excuse me. Sorry. Names and who goes back on?
There are a couple of ways. In his question is, how do you know who to add and who to take off? There's an algorithm for that. What did I mention in Pennsylvania? Somebody, the NGOs were using old copies of the voter rolls and putting those people back into them. And then, of course, those people aren't real voters. They're not really real. You know everyone you put in. You print ballots and you stuff them. Do you remember the story when the truck driver brought 200,000 ballots from New York to Pennsylvania? That's how I know that guy, and that's a true story. Those ballots were all, and I love it in a newspaper article that interviewed the guy, the official. They said to the county official, "What'd you do with this guy?" And they said, "We let him loose." Well, why? Because it's not illegal to drive ballots from New York to Pennsylvania, quote unquote. That's what it says. He was just a truck driver. He didn't do anything wrong. But somebody filled out 200,000 ballots, put them in the envelopes to bring to Pennsylvania to give to mules to drop in the drop boxes. Follow-up.
So as a follow-up, what happened in the 2016 election? How do you explain Trump pulling off the?
Okay, I know how to. Okay, I know this question. I always get this question. How did Trump win in 2016, and what happened in 2020? So here's the answer. They fill the rolls ahead of time with lots of people who aren't real voters. Then during the election, they're tracking. They know exactly what the tallies are and everybody who's voted. So you know how to stuff ballots. Okay? And then after the election, you clean up the evidence. That's the basic. What if during the election you didn't know who voted and what the tally was? What if you didn't know? Well, then you would stuff ballots according to your best estimates of what you needed. And that's exactly what happened. Is 3 days before the 2016 election, a team of white hat hackers, who I know, launched a denial of service attack on all the critical election systems in this country. So that for 3 days, the bad guys were in the dark. They didn't know what the tallies were. They didn't know who had voted. And they underestimated Trump, and he outperformed their best estimates. So that's why he won. And that's why Hillary wouldn't concede. And that's why Hillary said, the Russians hacked our elections. She's right, they were hacked, but they weren't. They didn't change the tallies. They just darkened the information so it couldn't get out. So then people say, well, why didn't we do the same thing in 2020? Yeah. We did. For 4 days leading up to the election, nobody knew who had voted because the systems were all denial of service attack. Okay? Which is why they had to turn the election off to find out what the stand was. Oh no, we're behind in Michigan. We're behind in Wisconsin. We're behind in Georgia. We're behind in Arizona. Which is why when you look at those curves, suddenly they had to add a whole bunch of people. If the machines had been online the whole time, it would have been smooth. You wouldn't have noticed because they would have added them gradually and systematically. But because they didn't know, they had to suddenly add a bunch. You see, you understand? So that's what happened in 2020.
Now this year.
Now this year.
Why is Trump running? That's what he's asking.
Why is Trump running?
I just want to say one thing. When you vote tomorrow, you can ask for a
paper ballot. Vote on paper.
You can ask. It's your legal right to ask for a paper ballot. So do it.
Vote on paper. Okay, so what about 2020? Why is Trump running? Is my strategy going to work fast enough? So David went to the battlefield when Goliath was there, remember? And when he arrived, he noticed there's this big oaf out in the battlefield insulting their God and insulting them. So he went to his 3 brothers and he said, hey, get out there and take care of this guy. He's insulting our God and insulting our nation. And what did his 3 brothers tell him? Go back to the sheep.
Yeah, that's right.
He didn't. He faced Goliath and he said, this battle isn't between you and me. This battle is between you and God. This is God's battle. And today, God is going to deliver you into my hands. He slew Goliath, and then the children of Israel chased the Philistines out of the land. The problem wasn't Goliath. The problem was the children of Israel were hiding in the hills. Now, in 2020, the election happened, and we all stood there like deer in the headlights. Me too. What the heck just happened? Because we knew something was wrong. That ain't natural, buddy. But we didn't know what it was, and we didn't know what to do. Right? We were just lost. And he didn't have a single legislature that would stand with him, and nothing. So we were all caught flat-footed. This time is different. I have personally spoken to 100,000 people in person, not to mention millions of people online and with videos. So as a country, we are ready this time. The citizens are not just going to roll over and give up this time, are we? We're not. And Trump, neither is Trump. Trump is being the David in my metaphor. Okay. He's standing. And the children of Israel is us in this metaphor. And we are not going to wait for David to fight Goliath. We're going to fight now. Right now. Because if we wait for the election, then it's like we're sitting on our hands waiting for somebody else to do what we're supposed to be doing. We need to be forming these teams all over the country, which we are. I mean, 800 counties now, teams. Not in all of them. Some of them are not working even. But, maybe at least 100 good teams right now around the country. And so imagine it's 100 counties where this is like swelling up. And there are some places, there are whole regions that are on board with this. So we're not going to allow this to happen anymore. So what would you ask Trump to do? Nothing? What can he do? He can run. And it gives him a bully pulpit, and that gives leadership, and that's David standing in front of Goliath. But remember, the problem really isn't Goliath. That's just a symptom of the problem. Our elections are not the real problem. The real problem is us. We're hiding in the hills. We are not doing our role, our constitutional obligations. We have to wake up, and until we do, we're going to be in this mess. So think of it as a rallying cry. Think of his running for election as a rallying cry to you, to me, and all of us to rise up and say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And all the experts I've talked to say they think that it's going to be violent after the election, regardless of which way it goes. If that's true, you better get armed. And I got a letter the other day in Warren County from somebody in my neighborhood who said, in case of emergency, this is where all the men are going to meet. Bring your guns. Okay? That's getting ready. Okay? Maybe we need to have a practice. If our country, we are on the brink of a civil war. Okay? I hope it doesn't go that way. I want to win the First Amendment war so we don't have to fight the Second Amendment war. But we are at the turning point. What a privilege to live at this time in history. What an amazing opportunity. More people alive now than ever before. This is it. This is us. This is 1776 all over again. This is amazing. I'm just so glad to be here. So how about, is that my answer to your 2024? Kind of?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of. I've spoken to him a lot. He's a good guy. Trump's actually a nicer guy than you think. In public, he's kind of a New York jerk, you know. But in private, he'll ask you a question and listen. You know, my daughter has Down syndrome. Search online for Trump and Down syndrome, and all these pictures will come up with Down syndrome children in the White House, in the Oval Office. He's hugging them. He won't even shake my hand. He's a germaphobe. Okay, but he lets Down syndrome kids maul him. Again, that tells you what kind of man he is. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. All right. Are you giving me the hook? We got to get out. I'll hang around and you can ask me questions while I'm cleaning up. Okay, one more. She's pretty.
I was just going to ask if you said that about Trump and how he's not going to give up. Tomorrow's our election here, primary, and there's been a lot of false advertisement against everybody that Trump's endorsed. How do we keep scumbags like Frank LaRose, Matt Dolan? You know, they're going to steal this race from Moreno and all the other candidates that he's endorsed. So what can they do? You know, what can we do tomorrow?
Okay, so you're about to have an election, and let's hope it's close. Then the candidate should not concede, and you should go to work immediately and look at a list of everybody who voted. If your clerk can't provide it, then you fire her, because if she can't even tell you who voted, then she's not doing her job, right? So you have everybody who voted, and you police that list, and you find the fraction of people who voted who were not real voters. And then you can overturn the election. We've overturned a lot of elections that way, by the way, around the country. But you'd be surprised. You never hear about them in the media, because the media will not cover them. The media is complicit. But, for example, in one Los Angeles city, we overturned a city council because we found 280 illegal voters in one illegal alien neighborhood, and it overturned his election. But we were ready to go, and you got to be ready. So I guess the plain conclusion: you got to get ready. And if you're not ready now, you better get ready. Yeah, it's soon. And so there you go. I know. I'm getting.